Chapter 297. At this moment, in the eyes of Adeline and Daphne, this strange man in front of them was simply a cold-blooded monster. Just a moment ago, he was hugging the two naked prostitutes on the bed, and the next moment, he raised his hand to kill them, breaking their necks without batting an eyelid. Such a cold-blooded person. Even though the two of them were born in the royal family and had seen a lot of heartless and cruel things since they were young, they couldn't help but be shocked by this person's ruthlessness. Almost subconsciously, the two women hugged each other. Adeline held Daphne's hand tightly. Daphne, on the other hand, as the crown princess and the daughter of Duke Minos, who came from a military family of the empire, was much calmer. She looked at the half-naked man in front of her and took a deep breath. "Sir, I haven't asked. You brought us out of the Governor-General's mansion. May I ask who you are?" Daphne said slowly. Popovdac smiled, then walked to the table and sat down. He picked up the bottle of wine on the table and took a big gulp. He glanced at Daphne, his eyes flashing with a trace of light. "Beautiful! What a beautiful woman! Haha, I've seen countless women in my life, but I've never seen a beauty like you. Praise the Almighty God. Returning to my homeland, I've actually seen such a beautiful woman." After saying that, his eyes drifted to Adeline's body. Adeline was tall, taller than Daphne by a head. Such a tall and straight figure was very rare among women. However, Popovdac's eyes stayed on Adeline for a longer time. His eyes flashed as he carefully sized up Adeline from head to toe. Then he suddenly exhaled and shook his head. "Perfect?" It was simply a perfect masterpiece. Although this tall beauty's face is a bit inferior to this blonde beauty, but her figure is the most beautiful I've ever seen in my life. I'm afraid that even the best sculptor wouldn't be able to carve such a perfect figure. After saying that, he kept clicking his tongue and slowly muttered in a low voice, "What beautiful legs, what a pair of beautiful legs." It was the beginning of summer, and Adeline was wearing a dress. She was tall and slender, and her legs were long and slender. Under the dress, a pair of long legs that seemed to have been carved out of ivory could be seen. Her skin was soft and lustrous, and her curves were full and round. Her legs were straight and flawless. Popovdac stared fixedly at Adeline's legs. After rolling his eyes a few times, he sighed again. "Praise the gods for letting me see such perfect legs." Adeline was so angry that her eyes widened. Just as she was about to rebuke him, Daphne gently pulled her and pinched Adeline's hand. She looked at the man in front of her and lowered her voice. "Looking at your appearance, you should be a Byzantium citizen as well. How can you speak so rudely? Who sent you here? Is it General Jean-Claude?" General Junker was the leader of the Dark Knight Imperial Army. The Dark Knight Imperial Army was the personal guard of the royal family. Naturally, there were many experts in the army. Daphne thought that this man was an expert sent by the Dark Knight Imperial Army to rescue her. Popovdac was stunned and whispered to himself, "Junker? Junker?" His eyes suddenly lit up. "Aha, the Junker you're talking about is the leader of the Dark Knight Imperial Army. You two women, who are you?" Daphne was stunned and couldn't help but blurt out, You don't know who we are? You?" Popovdac smiled. "I went to the governor's mansion tonight just to light a few fires and scare that guy Hughes. It's also interesting to give them some trouble. As for saving you two burdens, it was just a spur of the moment. Seeing that your courtyard was heavily guarded, I thought that you were some important guests of the governor's mansion, so I let you out." You mentioned Junker. Are you from the Byzantium royal family?" The two girls looked at each other and kept their mouths shut. Daphne was more cautious and had more doubts. This person kept saying Byzantium royal family. Listening to his tone, could it be that he wasn't from Byzantium? Popovdac was in a good mood, but he stood up and slowly walked to the two girls. He looked at them up and down and smiled. This tall and beautiful little sister, your eyes are bright, you are a lively girl. Let me think, in the Byzantium royal family there is a princess named Adeline who has Odin blood. Could it be you? As for this gentle and moving beauty, she has a noble and elegant temperament. Even when she was fleeing, she was still calm and graceful. Coupled with your beautiful appearance, I think there is only one person in the imperial family who is like you. The youngest daughter of the Duke of Minas, the wife of the current Crown Prince Garcia of Byzantium, Crown Princess Daphne, right? Daphne's face was pale. She gently bit her lips and pulled Adeline behind her. She straightened her chest and looked at the man in front of her. Who are you? Bob of Dax smiled but didn't answer. He touched his nose and said with a frown, I didn't expect to catch two big fish on a spur of the moment. This is troublesome. But it's also strange that the two of you were caught by the rebels. Why didn't the news leak out? That's right, the two of you were caught by the enemy. If the news got out, it would be a huge scandal. The royal family naturally wouldn't take the initiative to publicize this kind of thing. Hee, but with the two of you, I'm in trouble. The two of you are so important, the governor's office won't let this go. He suddenly jumped up, grabbed the clothes on the ground and put them on. After putting them on, he bowed to the two girls and said with a smile, Ladies, I think this is a misunderstanding. Let's part here. You didn't see me tonight, and I didn't see you. How about it? After he finished speaking, he jumped onto the windowsill, lifted the corner of the window, and was about to go out. Daphne hurriedly shouted, Wait a minute! Bob of Dax turned around and looked at Daphne. He smiled bitterly. What's wrong? You saved us and left us here, and now you're just going to leave? Daphne's face turned red and she was a little anxious. We two girls, how can we leave this city? The outside is very strict now, maybe we'll be caught as soon as we go out. Bob of Dax shook his head. This is not a problem that I'm worried about. Your Highnesses. He paused and said with a straight face, I just wanted to make a fuss today, but I didn't expect to save the two of you. If it was just an ordinary person, the governor's mansion would have calmed down after a while. However, the two of you have special identities. The guards in the governor's mansion will definitely pursue you relentlessly. They will not give up until they get you back. I still have important things to do, and I don't want to get into trouble like this. Anyway, I've already helped you a lot by taking you out of the governor's office. As for how to get out of America City, it's up to you two. Seeing that this man was going to leave again, how could Daphne let him go so easily? The two of them had been captured for so many days, and they had tried many times to escape without success. This mysterious man had made a big fuss in the governor's office overnight and saved them so easily. It was obvious that he was a very capable person. Seeing that they were about to escape, how could they let him go? Wait a minute. Daphne gritted her teeth. I know the identity of the two of you. The governor's office will definitely seal the city and investigate. I beg you one thing. I don't want to escape, I just want you to take Adeline away from here. She paused, ignoring Adeline's exclamation, and whispered, I'll write you a letter. As long as you can save Adeline and get out of here, go to the south and find my Minas family's territory, there will naturally be a generous reward. Not to mention more, but tens of thousands of gold coins. My family can still afford it. Tens of thousands of gold coins? Bob of Dax lowered his head and thought seriously, then shook his head. No, the price is not low, but I'm afraid I won't have the life to spend it. You two women are weak and have no ability at all. Taking one of you with me will be a big burden. It's easy for me to escape by myself, but if I take one with me, I'm afraid I'll also be caught. Looking at your appearance, you're also from Byzantium. As long as you can save her, not only will you be rewarded with money, you'll also be given an official title. I don't care about an official title in the Byzantine Empire. Bob of Dax raised his eyebrows. Speaking of which, he suddenly laughed. Speaking of which, I saved you from the governor's office tonight. You haven't even repaid such a kindness, and you want me to do more? Daphne was helpless. We don't even have a copper coin on us now, as long as you save her, naturally. How can I believe in empty words? Daphne frowned. Then you want to, Bobovdax suddenly laughed. Since you don't have money on you, you might as well use your chastity as a reward, Pa. As soon as he finished speaking, Adeline was furious. She bent down and took off one of her shoes and threw it at Bobovdax. Bobovdax caught it with one hand, but deliberately winked and smiled. Not bad, not bad. Take off the other one too, so I can see more clearly. Adeline had gone on an adventure with Shea on the wildfire plains and had even seen the scene of a dragon slaying, so she was naturally not timid. She immediately took off her shoe and threw it over. But Daphne pulled her back. The crown princess expression was calm, and there was no anger on her face, but there was a hint of a smile in her eyes. She slowly said, "Okay, you're not his opponent." She paused and looked at Bobovdax. Although this gentleman's words are not very polite, I can see that his eyes are clear, and he's not a perverted bad person. He's just deliberately teasing us. Don't say that, don't say that. Bobovdax waved his hand. I don't have such soft ears. You want me to work for you just because you said a few nice words? How can there be such a good thing? Daphne said indifferently. If that's the case, then please state your condition. If it's really not possible, we'll just wait here for someone to take us back. It's our own fate, it has nothing to do with you. Dax frowned and looked at Daphne from top to bottom. This beautiful girl's expression was calm and composed, without the slightest trace of nervousness or panic. He couldn't help but sigh. What a smart duke's daughter, and a smart crown princess. He then looked at the angry Adeline and shook his head, saying in a disdainful tone, "What an idiot princess." Adeline was furious, but Daphne grabbed her. Daphne's eyes contained a hint of a smile. "Okay, sir, we were just joking." Dax jumped down from the window and returned to the table, looking at Daphne. "You were afraid that I'd run away, why aren't you afraid now? It's an urgent matter, and when I saw that you were about to leave, I panicked." Daphne's tone was calm, and her beautiful face was unperturbed. "But after thinking about it, although we two girls are useless, we still have the status of royalty. Even if you saved us by accident, it's still a rare commodity. I can see that you're a smart person, so you naturally know that if you can save us, there will be great benefits. If you abandon us here, you're a stupid person. You deliberately acted like that just now. It's nothing more than asking for a price. What do you want? Just say it." Dax scratched his head and smiled. "It's not good for a woman to be too smart. How about this? I don't want much, just 100,000 gold coins. Your Highness, please write an IOU." Daphne was stunned for a moment, but she didn't hesitate. She immediately sat at the table and wrote an IOU. When she handed it to Dax, Dax reached out to take it, but when he saw Daphne's hand, his eyes fell on her fingers, and he couldn't look away. Daphne was born with unparalleled beauty, and even before she reached adulthood, she was known as the #1 beauty of the Empire's nobility. There was no need to talk about her appearance, and her hands were also slender and fair. Once, at her 16th birthday banquet, a famous scholar and poet of the Empire had personally seen Daphne pick a flower in the garden. He had once used a poem to describe Daphne's beauty, and even described her jade hands, when such a pair of hands gently climbs down the flower branch. I don't know if I should cry for the flower, or be jealous of it. When the flower is climbed down, life is over. But to be plucked by such hands is happiness. With such a description, Daphne's hands were naturally slender and moving. Her 10 fingers were slender and well-proportioned, soft and boneless, and her skin was white and tender. But when Dax's eyes stared at Daphne's hands, he didn't seem to have much lust. Instead, he seemed to be surprised and at a loss. It only took a moment for Dax to receive the IOU, and as if he had forgotten to look at it, he directly put it into his pocket. He then exhaled, and as if it was an accident, he glanced at Daphne. "Your Highness, there seems to be a red at the base of your index finger." Daphne was stunned for a moment, but she didn't care and casually said, "I was born with it." Dax made a sound of acknowledgement, but then raised his eyes to look at Daphne and smiled. "When I saw your Highness holding the brush, there seems to be a red dot at the center of your palm as well." What he said was nonsense. How could a person's palm be exposed when holding a brush? Daphne didn't understand what he meant, but she still nodded. "That's right, I also have a red dot at the center of my palm. I was also born with it." Dax gave a vague and muttered something along the lines of "that's rare" before returning to his normal self. He didn't even look at Daphne as he turned around and walked to the bed. He tossed his bundle onto the bed and rummaged around for a while before taking out a robe. The robe was gray, but when he put it on, it was a standard Byzantine Empire magician's cloak. He casually pinned something to his chest. It was a silver oak leaf badge. The badge was shining, and there was a faint light floating around it. How could the two girls from the imperial family not recognize it? This was a mid-level magician's badge. Moreover, magician's badges were enchanted with magic, so they couldn't be faked easily. But where did Dax get this thing from? The magical light it emitted seemed to be real. Dax immediately poured some warm water and washed his face. He then took out a bottle of potion and sprayed it on his face. Then, he reached under his chin and peeled off a layer of skin. Adeline cried out in surprise at first, but then she realized that it was a mask. Looking at Dax's face again, he no longer had the rough appearance with thick eyebrows and big eyes. Instead, he had thin eyebrows and a straight nose, looking like a handsome young man. There was a hint of femininity between his eyebrows, but it was the kind of delicateness that could arouse a woman's maternal instincts. Who would have thought that this hateful guy's original appearance was actually so delicateness? Dax then cut off a few strands of hair and stuck them around his chin and temples with potion. Instantly, it turned into a long beard. He then took out another bottle of potion and sprayed it on his face. Not long after, his originally fair and delicateness turned yellow. His skin sagged, and even the flesh on his face drooped a little. Fine and deep wrinkles appeared at the corners of his eyes, as if they were carved out by a knife or an axe. Looking at it now, it was as if he had aged 40 years in an instant. He then took out a bottle from his bag and a pill and put it in his mouth. He smiled and said, "How is it? My appearance isn't bad, right?" As soon as he opened his mouth, his voice was hoarse and filled with vicissitudes of life, scaring the two girls. Saying that, Dax hooked his finger at the two girls. "If you two want to leave the city, you'll have to put on makeup. I'll be a magician, and you two will be a magician's apprentice." Seeing Adeline walk over, Dax glanced at Adeline's slender legs and said with a smile, "My makeup products are very expensive, so you can't use them for free. How about this? I'll reluctantly take a loss. Your Highness with long legs, stretch out your legs and let me touch them. Then we'll call it even, how about it?" Adeline was enraged and shouted, "Go to hell!" Another shoe flew over and hit Dax's face. Although this Dax's mouth was flowery, it was only limited to his words. He didn't really do anything. However, after he put on the makeup, the appearance of the two girls changed drastically in less than a moment. Daphne had turned into a woman in her 30s, and her hair had turned brown. Her originally fair and delicate face had turned dark and rough. She wore a long robe and a pointed cloak, and looked just like a mage's attendant. As for Adeline, because her height was too obvious, Dax simply put on makeup and made her look like a man. He put something on her shoulders and it instantly doubled in width. She also wore thick clothes and looked a bit like a tiger's back and a bear's waist. However, Dax probably did it on purpose. He made Adeline's face ugly and wretched. She had a pair of triangular eyes, a crooked nose, and a wide mouth. He even put some eye drops in her eyes. Her originally limpid eyes became turbid. In the end, Dax stood in front of Adeline and looked at her for a long time before sighing. "No, no, your back is too straight and your temperament is too arrogant. You'll attract attention. How about this, you pretend to be a cripple and walk with a limp. Can you do it? Adeline suppressed her anger and forced herself to walk 2 steps in the room. Dax shook his head. No, your acting is too bad. Saying that, he came to Adeline's side and looked her up and down. Suddenly, without saying a word, he lifted his leg and kicked Adeline's left ankle. This time, Adeline immediately screamed and fell to the ground. Her ankle was swollen. She wanted to get up and fight this bastard, but she couldn't stand properly and staggered back down. Dax showed a satisfied smile and said lightly, That's more or less enough. This guy hurt Adeline and didn't care that she was a princess. He didn't have the slightest bit of tenderness for the fairer sex. This kick was ruthless and heavy, almost turning Adeline into a cripple. When the sky was still dark, the 3 of them jumped out of the window and hid in a small street for a while. When the sky was bright, they swaggered out and walked towards the city gate. Along the way, although there were city guards patrolling the area, but seeing Dax's attire, which made him look like an old magician, who would dare to stop him? Even when he reached the city gate, Dax's expression was still cold and arrogant as he swaggered out. The soldiers guarding the city came forward to stop him. Dax was immediately dissatisfied and angrily said, "Lowly things, since when did magicians have to be interrogated? Is this how you Armenians treat magicians?" On the continent, no matter what era it was, magicians were always a privileged group. From the emperor to the commoners, they were all respectful to magicians and would never offend them. Magicians were a rare and precious group. They couldn't be recruited, so how could they offend them? Even if there was a civil war in the empire, no rebel army would dare to be rude to magicians. Firstly, magicians had always been powerful. It was unwise to provoke such a strong enemy. Secondly, the Byzantium Church didn't express their stance and announced that they wouldn't participate in the civil war. With the Church's attitude, the magicians on the continent were under the control of the Magician Union, and the Magician Union was under the leadership of the Church. Since the Church announced that they wouldn't participate in the civil war, most of the magicians on the continent would stay neutral and not help either side. Even if there were a few magicians who joined both sides, it wouldn't be good for them to do so. At a time like this, magicians had become a target that both sides wanted to recruit. Even if they couldn't recruit them, they couldn't afford to offend them. The officer guarding the city was immediately alarmed by Dax's reprimand. He hurriedly ran over and sized Dax up. When he saw the mage's attire and the dazzling magic badge on his chest, he quickly bowed and hurriedly ordered the guards to let them go. He didn't dare to stop Dax in the slightest. Moreover, Dax's group of 3, Daphne had disguised herself as a middle-aged female magic apprentice, and Adeline had disguised herself as a lame man. She walked with a limp and didn't look like she was faking it. The poor thing complained tearfully, "It wasn't faking, it hurts." Finally, the 3 of them left the city unscathed. After walking for 3 to 4 li, they left the main road and went onto a remote path. Dax lay on the ground and listened for a long time. After confirming that there were no pursuers behind them, he finally let out a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "All right, we're finally out." Daphne looked at the mysterious man in front of her. "Sir, are you really a magician? That magic badge of yours doesn't seem to be fake, does it?" Dax smiled. "I'm not a magician, but this badge is real. I borrowed it, so I have to return it. I can't lose it." He then took off his robe and smiled. "We're out of Merica City, but how do we go from here? What do you think, your highnesses?" He seemed to be asking for their opinion, but he continued. "South to Osgilla City. Although it's the closest, there's a fierce battle going on outside the city. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers are fighting, and the city has long been surrounded by the rebel army. With just the 3 of us, to break through the rebel army's camp and rush into the city. I don't have that ability. As for the east and west, those are the rebel army's military territories. I don't think you 2 are interested in going there." It seems that you want to go north. Daphne smiled faintly. We both know that we can't return to the capital now. Since you said you want to go north, where do you want to take us? We'll just have to take one step at a time. Dax shrugged. Adeline was already sitting on the ground, gently rubbing her swollen ankle. She was annoyed. She looked at this despicable guy and gritted her teeth. She thought to herself, north is the best. When we get to Shea's place, I'll have that country bumpkin split you with a flaming fork. Country bumpkin. I thought that guy was the most tyrannical person in the world, but this guy in front of me is 100 times more despicable than him. When we get to Shea, I'll have him beat this guy up. Adeline was thinking about how to deal with this despicable guy when Dax walked up to her. He bent down and smiled. Your Highness must be cursing me in your heart right now, right? Humph. Adeline turned her head away. That. Dax rubbed his chin. We're out of the city and you're safe now. As for the reward, can you pay me a little first? I know you don't have any money on you, so I'll take a little loss. Your Highness with long legs, stretch out your legs and let me touch them. Shameless scoundrel, die. Adeline raised her eyebrows and shouted angrily. She jumped up and kicked him, but then she screamed and fell to the ground. Stupid woman, didn't anyone tell you not to kick people when you're injured? Dax looked at Adeline with a pitiful expression, then turned around and walked away with a regretful expression. Country bumpkin. I must let that country bumpkin beat this bastard up. Adeline sat on the ground and hugged her leg, her eyes red. Shea suddenly felt his whole body shiver, and a chill came up from behind. He looked around and wondered, why do I suddenly feel cold? It seems like someone is cursing me behind my back? The northwest corner of the city wall of Meta had been repaired, and the gap had been plugged up. The repair work of the city wall was also mostly completed. Although the city wall could not be rebuilt, the repairs had greatly strengthened the city's defense. Just a few days ago, 3 grand ceremonies were held in Meta. The first morning ceremony was for Lord Crincia, the governor of Moore County, who died for his country. Lord Crincia's head was hung on the city wall for many days, and when it was finally taken down, it was hastily buried with the body. Now that Meta had been restored, how could Shea, the cunning country bumpkin, let go of this great opportunity to buy people's hearts and boost morale? He held a mourning ceremony for Lord Crincia, personally paid his respects in front of Lord Crincia's grave, and laid an Empire's eagle flag on the tombstone, and trumpeted to express his condolences. Almost all the citizens of the city came out to watch. Lord Crincia had been an official in Moore County for 7 years, and had done a lot of good things for the local government. Shea's actions showed enough respect for Crincia, and naturally made the local people have a good impression of the new general. Suddenly, in the next few days, Shea set up several places in the city to recruit new recruits, and the number of people signing up increased by a lot. Shea's recruitment was also an act of helplessness. Although the Empire had a so-called peasant military system, this system had long been in name only. The local peasant soldiers were useless, and Shea had long given up hope. The second morning ceremony was to hear news from the front line that Manning's Scarlet Snow Army had wiped out the main force of the 7th Army, and all the captives were slaughtered. Shea held a mourning ceremony under the city gate. He asked an official from the original county governor's office in the city to write a declaration condemning the atrocities of Odin's people, scolding the invaders for being cruel and shameless, and calling on the people and civilians of Moore County to rise up and resist. That small official was quite talented, and the declaration was written with beautiful words and was impassioned. However, Shea was a rough person, and most of the profound and beautiful words, as well as the famous classical sentences, he did not know what they meant. It was no wonder, he was a country bumpkin who grew up in the mountains, and it was not bad that he could recognize words. It was also the old man's fault for being too careless in his teaching, and the books that Shea had read were only the notes and military books left behind by the old man. Fortunately, Shea painstakingly worked hard. After staying up all night, he braced himself and memorized the declaration. The next day, he gathered all the soldiers and civilians of the city at the assembly and recited it in front of everyone. Unexpectedly, there wasn't any big problem. Only, he missed out 2 paragraphs in the middle and others didn't notice it. During that meeting, the crowd was agitated, and they condemned the brutality of the invaders. Thousands of soldiers of the 7th Army, who were lucky enough to survive, thought of the miserable state of their comrades, and many of them burst into tears. The Central Army of the Empire had always had its own station, and even if it was a recruitment, many of them were recruited locally. In the army, there were many situations where fathers, sons, brothers, relatives, and friends served in the same army. The main force of the 7th Army that was annihilated, among the tens of thousands of soldiers, many of them were the fathers, brothers, and friends of the survivors here. This action immediately made the remaining soldiers of the 7th Army have a good impression of Sir Shea. As for the third ceremony, it was a small-scale funeral. As for the funeral object, it was none other than Sir Shea's good brother, good friend, good confidant, the Major General of the 7th Army, Sir Laidley. Laidley did not die of illness that day, but after he regained his breath, he was scared to death by Shea. Others did not see any clues. They only thought that General Laidley's injuries were too severe, and he died in the end. In order to win the hearts of the thousands of soldiers of the 7th Army, Shea held a funeral for Laidley. During the funeral, he personally presided over it, and wept bitterly as he recalled the sincere friendship he had with General Laidley. Even the eulogy was written by the petty official in the city who wrote the declaration. It was truly written with the utmost sincerity, and it was enough to make one cry. At the end, Shea was sobbing in front of everyone, but it was the officers of the 7th Army who advised Sir Shea not to be too sad, so as not to hurt his body. Shea then swore in front of everyone with snot and tears, "Laidley and I are as close as brothers. Not to mention that we are all comrades in the army, even if we put aside this tiger skin. Everyone here is Laidley's former subordinates. As Laidley's good brother, I cannot sit by and do nothing. From today onwards, I will shoulder all of Sir Laidley's unfinished business. His family is also my family. His responsibility is my responsibility. His soldiers are also my soldiers. I will definitely treat all of you like my own subordinates. There will be no distinction between us. As long as I, Shea Thunder, have something to eat, I will not let anyone starve. As long as I, Shea Thunder, have something to wear, I will not let anyone catch a cold." When he said that, many of the officers of the 7th Army who were originally terrified calmed down. After all, they were the guest army here, and they were the defeated generals. They did not even have a backbone, and were afraid of becoming stray dogs that no one cared about. This Shea has such a good relationship with our young general, it seems like he will definitely treat us well. However, it was not as if the 7th Army did not have any brains, and could vaguely hear a question from Shea's words. Isn't this a blatant annexation? But at this moment they were lacking in numbers, and their food and clothing were all provided by others. How could they have the capital to challenge? With Shea's crying, the 4,000 remnant soldiers of the 7th Army came to seek refuge. Although they cried during the funeral, their hearts were incomparably happy. But when they came down, their eyes hurt. Last night, in order to let them cry during the funeral, they had prepared some chilly water in their sleeve. But because they were agitated today, they had applied too much. Their eyes were red and swollen, and even during dinner, they were still crying from time to time. If other people saw them, they would only think that this sir was a good man who valued relationship. To be so sad over the death of his brother, it seemed like he was definitely a good person, but in Shea's mind, Dora was laughing so hard that even her voice was distorted. From morning to night, He could hear the female dragon laughing non-stop in his mind. Shea even suspected that even if Dora was still alive, she would have laughed herself to death long ago with such a way of laughing. Ha 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 ha! Shea, you little brat, you are truly despicable, shameless to the extreme. Ha 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 ha! At this point, Shea's subordinates, including the army in Denzel City, those recruited in the city over the past few days, the remnant soldiers of the 7th Army, and the allies of the 6th Army, had reached a total of 20,000 soldiers. With this kind of military strength, it was barely enough to form a regular army. Since they had some capital in their hands, with the character of a country bumpkin, naturally, they would not hide in the city obediently. Although 20,000 soldiers was not enough to fight the Scarlet Snow Army, if it was purely for defense, they would not necessarily be afraid of that old man Manninger. What's more, Shea was the kind of person who would stir up trouble for no reason. Since he had the capital in his hands, how could he not stir up some trouble? He asked someone to summon Grim from Denzel City to discuss their next move. Shea looked at the travel-worn Grim and asked him about the situation in Denzel City. Then, he pulled Grim aside to discuss quietly. I have an idea. That guy Manninger has been complacent in the South for too long. Now that we have capital in our hands, I will not be satisfied if we don't do something to him. Grim frowned and said, with our military strength, there is absolutely no chance of victory in a field battle. Moreover, the army is pieced together from all over the place. There are also problems with the cooperation between each other. Shea laughed and said, Manninger is in the South. For a moment, he has not realized that we have gathered so many people behind him. They are happily fighting in the South, but don't forget that there are still 2 local military rebel armies in the South. These guys are obviously colluding with the Odin people, but I don't believe that they are monolithic. Humph! Grim's eyes lit up. What do you mean? Shea leaned over and said in a low voice, when we captured Metter City, I killed off all the Odin prisoners. Firstly, it was to vent my anger. Secondly, it was to prevent news of us here from leaking out. Moreover, although we killed off all the Odin prisoners, we obtained a lot of weapons from the Odin people. There are also 200 reindeer. I did not kill a single one of them and kept them in a secret place outside the city. These days, I asked Miss Nene to bring hundreds of people to the forest outside the city to practice riding reindeer. Hee hee. Grim laughed. He already understood Shea's intention. You are really cunning. Shea snorted. Fishing in troubled waters. We are surrounded by enemies and our strength is the weakest. If we don't mess up the situation, how can we survive? He paused for a moment before sneering. The Odins are definitely coveting our land and wealth when they invade the South. Their hearts are not content and they can easily get what they want. If they get what they want too easily, it would be hard for them to not be greedy. The Odin people are still living in harmony with the rebel armies because of the secret alliance between the 2 sides. However, no matter how strong the alliance is, it is not as hard as the knife in your hand. No matter how strong the alliance is, it cannot withstand the temptation of money and land. Humph, do you think Manninger and those Odin people don't want to snatch more? Do you think those rebel armies are not worried when they see the Odin army gathered at their doorstep? As for us, we only need to provide them with an opportunity to turn hostile. Speaking up to this point, the country bumpkin clapped his hands and laughed. I am the best at fanning the flames. As he spoke, although he was smiling, tears suddenly streamed down his face. Grim was puzzled. However, he heard Shea curse. Damn it, what kind of damn chilly water is this? It's been a day and my eyes still hurt. Lao Tzu, don't want to cry, woo 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 woo. Today is another 10,000 words. Begging for votes. Monthly votes, recommendation votes, the more the better. Tomorrow, there will be another 10,000 words update. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 299. GOR Chapter 285 Professional Robberies. The small path made its way through the forest. The terrain on both sides of the path was somewhat high and the forest was quite dense. Under the guidance of the leading horse bandit, Sheya and the others hid behind He Shujen on the slopes on both sides of the path. These mounted bandits were clearly veterans in this business. Without needing any instructions from Sheya, they began assigning tasks to each of them. Some hurried to open the path, some drew their bows, some knocked their arrows, and some quickly pulled down the small path. All of the ropes were painted with black paint. In the dim forest, if one did not get close enough, one would not be able to see them. Two of the remaining bandits moved to the front to scout the path, while the other two moved to the far side of the forest to keep watch. The rest, like Sheya, were in the forest on both sides of the path. Each of them cleverly looked for various hidden places behind tree roots and rocks to hide. Without any instructions, each and every one of them held their breath and calmed down, waiting for the target to come. Seeing how these fellows, who were already wearing the uniform of the Empire's cavalry, were so familiar with the job, Sheya did not know whether to laugh or cry. When these fellows talked about this kind of shady business, all of them rubbed their palms together in excitement and beamed with joy. Some of them even prepared several large bags of fine sand. When their target came, they would throw them out to confuse their target's vision. Son of a bitch, it seems these fellows are more professional than Lao Tzu. Country Bumpkin thought to himself. Back when I was in the Wildfire Plains, I had also considered doing this kind of part-time robberies. However, I was far from being as familiar as these professional fellows. Just as he was thinking, he heard a few bird-like whistling sounds coming from the direction of the road ahead. When the bandits heard it, they immediately beamed with joy. Someone next to She gently pulled him and said in a low voice, "The brothers in front have reported that the rabbit has fallen into the trap, my lord." After a while, the squeaking sound of wheels could be heard from the distance. A few fully loaded carriages came into sight. In front of the carriages were several cavalrymen wearing leather armor and holding sabers and bows. Seeing this scene, everyone hurriedly lowered their bodies. Gradually, the majority of the group entered everyone's line of sight. There weren't too many people in this group. There were more than 10 large carts, and they were all fully loaded. There were thick mats on top of the carts, and no one knew what was inside. There were about 45 cavalrymen guarding the carriage. Apart from the 7 or 8 cavalrymen at the front, most of them were gathered behind the carriages. Behind the cavalry, there was an exquisite 4-wheeled carriage pulled by 2 fine horses. The carriage was exquisitely made, and the wood was painted black and shiny. Obviously, it was not a carriage that ordinary people could sit in. Around the carriage were 20 cavalrymen. All of them were wearing light armor and had sabers hanging from their horses. 10 of them even had military short crossbows hanging from their saddles. Seeing the short crossbows, Sheya's spirit was immediately lifted. To be able to make such rare goods, the person in the carriage was obviously someone of extraordinary status. When the team gradually walked into the ambush circle, a whistle suddenly sounded from both sides. Then, 2 rumbling sounds could be heard. At the front and back of the group, 2 or 3 large trees by the side of the road were brought down. The thick and solid tree trunks immediately blocked the path of the group. The people in the group were immediately alarmed. However, on both sides of the small road, between the trees, and behind the rocky slope, numerous mounted bandits jumped out. A wave of arrows was shot out, and a few miserable cries could be heard. Immediately, more than 10 cavalrymen fell from their horses. The cavalrymen immediately surrounded the frightened war horses. Just as they were about to counterattack, several large sandbags fell from above. Immediately, dust and sand filled the air, and many of the cavalrymen were blinded. Sounds of killing could be heard all around. The mounted bandits released another wave of arrows, and some of them rushed down from both sides with weapons. The path was narrow to begin with. There were large trees blocking the path from both the front and back. There were also cavalrymen galloping forward. However, after a few steps, the horse's hooves were tripped by the rope on the ground. Immediately, the horse fell down. The horse bandit who caught up with him took advantage of the situation and stabbed his saber into the gap of the horse's armor on the horse's neck. Immediately, blood spurted out, many mounted bandits shouted and rushed down. In just a moment, less than half of the cavalrymen were left. The cavalrymen were confined in such a narrow space, and their horses were unable to gallop and move freely. The mounted bandits were very clear in their distribution. 5 or 6 of them were left to shoot arrows from both sides, while the rest rushed into the group of cavalrymen and brandished their sabers. The cavalrymen were unable to move. They sat on their horses and tried to resist, but they had to bend down to touch the enemies on the ground. Amidst the screams, the cavalrymen at the front were all killed in a moment. These fellows were obviously well trained. Seeing that they were in a difficult situation, the remaining ones shouted and gathered around the luxurious carriage. Some of the elite guards took out short crossbows and shot at the mounted bandit. This kind of military short crossbow was well made and shot quickly. It was also small and handy in the hand. There was no need to aim. The short crossbow was loaded with 3 consecutive shots. Immediately, 4 or 5 of the mounted bandits at the front fell down. The cavalrymen dismounted and formed a formation around the carriage. For a moment, the situation seemed to be in a stalemate. Although the mounted bandits in the distance were also shooting with bows and arrows, the other side was in a formation. They even raised the small shields of the cavalrymen and clustered together. It was obvious that the remaining cavalrymen were all elites and were not afraid of death. The mounted bandits were also hindered by the sharp short crossbows. They rushed twice but were unable to get close. Instead, several of them were killed or injured. Shea could see everything clearly from the back. He suddenly shouted, "Brothers, back off! Watch Lao Tzu!" When the mounted bandits heard the shout from behind, they instinctively retreated. Suddenly, they heard a whooshing sound from above their head. A huge black shadow streaked across the top of their heads. With a boom, a huge rock the size of a table flew from behind and hit the roof of the carriage. The 2 cavalrymen who were standing beside the carriage had their heads smashed open. The roof of the carriage was cracked open. Shea clapped his hands from behind and turned his head to see that there was another bigger rock on the ground beside him. He walked over in a few steps, bent down and hugged it with both hands. He exhaled and easily lifted it up. This rock was as big as a door. If it was not 10,000 jin, it would be at least 5 to 6,000 jin. Shea raised it up in his hands. His arms and eyes faintly glowed with a red light. With a loud shout, the huge rock flew over. With a loud caw-caw sound, the carriage was hit again. The carriage was completely smashed inwards, and the wooden planks were shattered into pieces. Many of the nearby guards were affected. Instantly, 2 or 3 of them had their heads broken and blood splattered everywhere. The mounted bandits immediately cheered. They felt that their new leader was indeed divine. Suddenly, they heard a mournful cry of despair from the opposite side. "Eldest young master is dead! Eldest young master is dead!" Shea raised his head to look. He saw that in the remaining half of the carriage, there was a person underneath the broken wooden planks of the carriage. The man's upper body was crushed under the rock, leaving only his legs exposed. The robe he was wearing was obviously made of luxurious material. Looking at the shape, his upper body had probably been crushed into meat paste. He couldn't be any more dead. Fresh blood flowed down his body. Hearing the mournful cry, Shea immediately waved his hand. He pulled out his flaming fork and rushed forward. "Brothers, let's go! Leave 1 or 2 alive for questioning." Although the remaining guards were elites, the death of the people in the carriage was a devastating blow to their morale. In just a moment they collapsed. Seeing that more than half of the remaining guards were dead or injured, they threw down their weapons and knelt down with their hands on their heads to surrender. The battle ended quickly. Shea had 2 captives with bloodstains on their faces brought forward for questioning. The 2 captives' faces were ashen. Judging from their attire, they were obviously officers of the cavalry. They said, "Our master is dead. Even if we go back, we won't be able to survive. Kill us if you want." Shea rolled his eyes and said, "Let me ask you something. If you come back honestly, I won't kill you. I'll even give you some money and let you go. How about it?" Hearing this, the 2 captives showed obvious expectation in their eyes. "Let me ask you. Judging from your attire, are you from the Corsican army?" The 2 captives looked at each other. One of them sighed and said, "Yes, we are the guards of the Corsican governor's office. I am the cavalry captain of the governor's office. My name is Guan." "The Corsican governor's office?" Shea's eyes suddenly lit up. Then, he interrogated them for a while. After the 2 captives had explained clearly, Shea laughed and forcefully slapped his thigh. His expression was strange, and there was a faint light of eagerness and excitement in his eyes. "Damn it! Is this really a blessing from the heavens? He killed the eldest son of the Corsica military with a simple robbery on the road?" He immediately sent people to clean up the carriage and move the body out. The upper body of the corpse was already blurred, and the head was like a rotten watermelon. However, the material of the clothes on the body was obviously not suitable for ordinary people. A gold family badge was found in the chest pocket of the corpse, which also belonged to the governor of Corsica, the Carlos family. There was no mistake about it. Shea was ecstatic, but he patiently interrogated the 2 captives again and again. Finally, he was relieved. After ordering people to tie up the 2 captives and keep them with the other captives, Shea summoned a few leaders of the horse gang to discuss. "This is the eldest son of the governor of Corsica. He was going to the Odin camp to negotiate. We fanned the flames and the 2 families were about to fight. This dead man was going to be a peacemaker, but unfortunately, he was killed by us." "Ha ha ha ha." The leader of the horse gang laughed and said, "Young master, it seems that the gods have blessed us. Without him to negotiate, the 2 families will definitely fight to the death." Someone next to him laughed and said, "That's right. It seems that our efforts are not in vain. Now we can just hide and watch the show." Shea stroked his chin and chuckled for a while. After a while, he solemnly shook his head and said, "No, no, Odin's people are just bluffing. Although that old man Manninger is arrogant, he is not brainless. He is just protecting his own people and deliberately putting on a show to scare the Corsicans. He has a view of the big picture and will not start a war without permission." Looking at the confused eyes of the horse gang, Shea smiled strangely and said, "They don't want to fight, but Lao Tzu has a way to make them fight. They can't stop fighting even if they don't want to." A leader of the horse gang asked, "Young master, what do you mean?" Shea was in a good mood at the moment. He did not even care that the other party called him young master. He smiled mysteriously and said, "Think about it. Odin won't fight, but we can force the Corsicans to fight." "How can we force them?" The country bumpkin laughed strangely and said, "Humph, the eldest son of the governor of Corsica died in the hands of Odin. In this way, even if the governor of Corsica can tolerate it, he can't tolerate his own son dying in the hands of others, right?" Some of the horse gang below were still brainless. Someone shouted, "Eh? Young master, this damned eldest son was obviously killed by us. How did he die in the hands of Odin?" A clever person next to him pulled this person hard and said with a smile, "Young master said that he died in the hands of Odin. Naturally, you have a way to make this person die in the hands of Odin. Right, young master?" Shea narrowed his eyes and touched his nose. Then, he pointed to the corpse next to him and said, "Take off the clothes of this damned eldest son. Go get some water and wash the clothes. After a pause, he smiled and said, Also, send a few of your brothers to bring the armor and weapons of those prisoners and the dead guards here. Although there were still some people who did not understand, some of the clever ones among the horse gang had already vaguely guessed what this young master was planning. After being busy for a while, a horse bandit came over with wet clothes for Shea. The bloodstains on the clothes were almost clear. It was indeed made of good material. After washing, the stains were almost all gone. Shea put the wet clothes on himself and turned around on the spot. He smiled and said, Look, doesn't Lao Tzu look like a young master from a rich family? This fellow was born in the wilderness. How could he have the aura of a noble? However, the horse gang around him were all uncouth. Everyone laughed and said, Not bad, not bad. Son-in-law is naturally wise and powerful. Not to mention pretending to be a noble, even being an emperor wouldn't be bad. Shea laughed. These bandits did not care about what they said, so he did not think much about it. Instead, he spat, Damn it, Lao Tzu is just a temporary impersonation. Pretending to be the son of that damn Governor Callows is a big loss. But it doesn't matter. This time, I'll pretend to be his son. Next time, I'll pretend to be Lao Tzu. Pausing for a moment, he touched his face. These nobles speak in a soft voice. I still have to dress up. Chapter 300. The guards were stripped naked. Some of the bandits seemed to have a wicked sense of humor, as they only left the poor guards with a pair of underwear and tied them up with ropes. More than 10 captives were tied together around several large trees. Their equipment had been collected by the mounted bandit. As the guards of the Corsican governor's mansion, their equipment was good stuff. The worst of the armors were black plate armors. Even in the Central Army, only the elite cavalrymen were equipped with such good stuff. Some of the elite guards were even wearing patterned armor, which was something that only the officers of the battalion could wear in the regular army of the Central Army. Although these bandits had been incorporated into the army, they were after all in a small place like Denzel City. Shea was only a local garrison. What kind of good stuff could he equip them with? They were nothing more than some ordinary military equipment used by local garrison troops. The cavalrymen were only given some simple breastplates. The main body of the breastplates were made of leather, with a few pieces of iron padding on the key parts. Seeing that they had obtained so many good things, the bandits immediately began to fight over them. The weapons used by the guards of the Corsican governor's mansion were of the highest quality, especially the 7 to 8 exquisite crossbows, which were highly sought after by the bandits. These short and sharp weapons were light and convenient to carry around. They were quick to fire when picked up. Furthermore, these crossbows had extremely strong penetrative power. Within 20 steps, they could even penetrate iron armor. The leaders of the bandits did not hold back and wanted to take one each. But Shea quickly stopped these guys from making a ruckus and snatching action. If these sharp weapons are scattered, they'll be useless. Only when they're in the hands of a team of people, they'll be sharp enough when they're used in battle. You officers are just showing off by holding them in your hands. You might as well hold a fire stick. Shea made the decision and selected a few of the bandits who were good at archery. He gave each of them a crossbow and equipped them with the armor of the elite guards, forming a team of their own. The rest of the people divided the remaining items. After spending a lot of time in the woods, the horse gang finally changed their appearances. They put on the uniforms of the guards of the Corsican governor's mansion and Shea, who was wearing a luxurious robe. It was a pity that the carriage had been smashed by Shea and the carriage could not be repaired. However, the 2 horses pulling the carriage were of the highest quality. Shea chose a horse as his mount. He put the fiery fork in his waist and hid it under his jacket. He stood in front of everyone and said with a smile, "What do you think?" The few mounted gangsters looked at each other. Some of them agreed, but some of them couldn't help but say, There's no need to talk about the son-in-law's appearance. He's very impressive. But no matter how I look at it, if I were to pretend to be the young master of such a wealthy family, it seems a little lacking. Shaya was also helpless. His figure was tall and sturdy, and he was extraordinarily handsome. If he were to wear armor, he would impressively have the appearance of a fierce general. Dressed as a noble child, he lacked a bit of nobility. After thinking for a long time, a mounted gangster suddenly patted his head and grabbed a handful of white powder from the pocket behind his buttock. He said with a smile, "Son-in-law, I see that those nobles have snow-white faces like women. You might as well apply some of this." Shaya looked at the white powder in the guy's hand and stared at him. "What is it?" "Lime." The mounted gangster laughed. "Just now when we blocked the road, I was going to throw it to confuse them. However, I didn't use it and these guys were knocked down by us. It's not easy to make lime. I got this small bag when I was building the city wall in Meta City. I haven't been willing to use it. This is good stuff. If you suddenly throw it out when you're killing people, even if you're a powerful expert, it's inevitable that you'll fall for it if you're not careful." Hearing this, Shaya's hair stood on end. Carefully looking at his subordinates' cavalry, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. These guys, it's hard to change their thieving nature, and it's hard to get rid of their wild nature. Each and every one of them would talk about killing and robbing people, and they would be beaming with joy and in high spirits. Damn it, what kind of soldiers did Lao Tzu bring? "Son-in-law, mix some oil and apply it evenly on your face. You can only use oil and not water. This lime will burn as soon as it comes in contact with water." Shaya was helpless. He could only pinch his nose and get some oil from the roast meat. He mixed it with the lime and rubbed it on his face a few times. His face turned pale. Immediately, the mounted gangster beside him took a look and grabbed 2 handfuls of lime and rubbed it on Shaya's neck, arms and other exposed areas. It seemed that the originally healthy guy had turned into a person with a pale face, as if he was seriously ill. Several mounted gangsters looked for a while and then shouted, "It's done! Now he looks a bit like a weak aristocrat." Shaya fiddled with these people for a while before shaking his head and saying, "Okay, let's go. I hope it doesn't rain today, otherwise Lao Tzu's face will be painted." Someone below asked, "Son-in-law, where are we going to do business?" Shaya glared, "What business?" "We're going to carry out a secret military mission." This mounted gangster was submissive, but his expression was obviously disapproving. Shaya was helpless and could only pretend not to see. He said, "With how we're dressed, it's possible to sneak into Meningo's camp. But the key is that Meningo has seen Lao Tzu before. We can't hide it from him. But we don't have to go to Meningo's camp. We just need to find a group of Odin's men and mess with them. Then we'll take the opportunity to run away and we'll be the scapegoat." Then the group of mounted gangsters changed their clothes. Most of them pretended to be the guards of the governor's mansion of Corsica, while some pretended to be the coachmen escorting the transport carts. Shaya and the others had seen the things on the transport carts. Most of them were cattle and sheep, and there were more than 10 barrels of good wine. In addition, there were a few boxes of gold coins. As for the gold coins, Shaya naturally didn't hesitate to keep them and sent 10 mounted gangsters to take them to Meta City. Before leaving, Shaya looked at the captives in the forest and sighed, "I don't want to kill too many people, but we can't leak the news of this matter. Alas, I can only apologize." The mounted gangsters who stayed by the tree to guard the captives raised their knives after receiving Shaya's order. The group swaggered out of the forest and headed towards the lower reaches of the Luoluo River. This side of the Rolo River was Corsica's territory. In the past 2 days, with the mobilization of Odin's troops, the Corsican army also took action. Some troops were stationed in several villages along the river as a precaution. Many beacon towers were also erected. As for the main troops, they were set up in the second-tier towns behind to provide support. Shaya and the others swaggered along the road by the river. They passed by 2 villages along the way and encountered the Corsican guards. Shea did not show up but hid in the transport carts. He only asked a mounted gangster to pretend to be a guard of the governor's mansion and take the gold badge of the Carlos family. The small troops along the river saw this group of people wearing the equipment of the elite guards of the governor's mansion and showing the gold badge. How would they dare to stop them? They could only let them go and send a small group of people to escort them from afar. Some of the troops were under the command of Gaia, the second son of the governor of Corsica. They did not dare to stop them and could only hurriedly report back. They walked like this for a whole day. Along the way, they passed by 3 villages and 4 sentry posts. Many pairs of eyes saw that the honorable eldest son was ordered to negotiate with the Odin's troops on the other side of the river. This was the result that Shea wanted. It was not until the next day that they crossed the river and entered the territory of the Odin's people. There were originally many bridges on the Rollo River. One of them was at the entrance of a village downstream. 2 Corsican battalions were stationed here. Shea and the others swaggered across the river and headed towards the Odin's place on the other side. The Odin's people did not have many troops stationed on the other side of the river. There were only less than 300 Odin's warriors. Coincidentally, this group of people had a strong background. They were the direct subordinates of Meningo's son, Morka. The structure of the Odin's army was crude. When an army was formed in battle, the patriarch would give the order and the warriors under his banner would respond to the call. Under the army, there were many banners. The concept of banners was very complicated. The big banners could have thousands of people and the small ones could have hundreds of people. Morka, the son of Meningo, led his own banner and had 2,000 to 3,000 people. However, most of them were now scattered to plunder everywhere. There were only about 300 people left on the riverside to monitor the movements of the Corsican troops on the other side of the river. Shea and the others were quickly stopped when they crossed the river. Although these Odin's people were fierce and domineering, they did not dare to be negligent when they heard that the son of the governor of Corsica had come to negotiate in person. They divided half of their men to escort and supervise Shea and the others to the capital of Ilton County. Along the way, Shea ordered his horse bandits to act friendly with the Odin's people. At first, the Odin's people were a little wary. However, these horse bandits were all brothers. Every time they stopped to rest, they would take the initiative to chat up the Odin's people. Anyway, there were plenty of good wine and food in the transport carriages. The governor of Corsica had spent a lot of money on this negotiation. He knew that the Odin's people were fond of wine. The dozen barrels of wine in the carriages were all the best wine stored in the cellar of the governor's mansion. If a barrel was taken out and sold on the market, it could be sold for hundreds of gold pieces. Originally, these good wines were not something that ordinary soldiers could enjoy even if they were sent to the Odin's army. They were distributed to the leaders of the Odin's army, such as Meningo. However, Shea was generous. He opened these barrels casually on the way. When they were resting and eating, he opened them for the Odin's soldiers to enjoy as if they were free. These Odin's people came from the bitter cold of the northern kingdom. When had they ever enjoyed such good wine? This was the wine from the governor's mansion of Corsica. The wine was clear and mellow. The Odin's people were drunk. They only opened one barrel and tasted a little. Immediately, it caused a commotion. These Odin's people soon let down their guard. After all, they had already entered their own territory and were surrounded by their own army. The other party was only a peace negotiation team of about 100 people. What was there to be worried about? Moreover, these horse bandits listened to Shea's orders and put on airs. They treated these Odin's people like masters. They flattered them loudly and seduced them with the wine. In less than half a day, these horse bandits had already become brothers with the Odin's people. After traveling for a whole day, they were about to reach the first strategic town in Ilton County. There were 5,000 to 6,000 Odin's soldiers stationed in this town. When they were 50 miles away from the city, Shea refused to leave. He knew that they had reached the end of the road. If they went any further, they would really enter the city. What else could he do then? He immediately ordered his horse bandits to discuss with the leader of the Odin's soldiers that they were going to stop and rest. They would enter the city after dark. These Odin's people initially refused. After traveling for a day and a night, although they felt that these Corsicans were weak and polite, they also felt that these Corsicans were useless. They were dragging their feet and moving slowly. They had already started to look down on them. Moreover, after traveling such a long distance, everyone wanted to go to the city early to rest. They wanted to live in a house and have a good bath with hot water. Seeing that they were almost there, why would they stop and rest? However, Shea had an idea. He simply asked his men to invite the leader of the Odin's army to meet him for a chat. This Odin's people had drunk a lot of Shea's fine wine along the way, so they were much more polite. When Shea asked them to stop and rest, the leader was dissatisfied, but he only politely refused. Shea sighed and smiled bitterly. "Brave warrior, we also have some difficulties." After a pause, he pointed at the transport carts behind him and smiled bitterly. "The fine wine that I brought was originally meant for Patriarch Manninger. These wines are all top-quality treasures. In our Byzantium, they are worth 1,000 gold coins per barrel." This shameless country bumpkin had no scruples. He immediately increased the value of the wine by 10 times. When the Odin's people heard this, they were shocked. 1,000 gold coins per barrel? Then what they were drinking was not wine, but gold. However, when they recalled the mellow taste of the wine and the endless aftertaste, they couldn't help but believe it a little. Shea continued, "Originally, these things were meant for Patriarch Manninger, but I saw that everyone had worked hard escorting us, so I ordered 2 barrels to be opened as a reward for all of you brave warriors." But who would have thought that while everyone was drinking happily, we accidentally drank more than half of the wine that was supposed to be a gift. We were about to reach our destination, but the gift that was supposed to be given to Lord Manninger ended up in our stomach. When we see your clan leader, we won't be able to explain ourselves. These words caused the Odin's people to immediately turn red. Among the Odin's people, the Patriarch's prestige was the most important. This was a tradition. Manninger's prestige was extremely high, and everyone in the Bashak tribe respected him. He didn't expect that he would take the Patriarch's things for himself. The Odin's leader felt guilty and scared. The Odin's people valued fairness the most. The spoils of war had to be distributed fairly. If anyone took the property of others, it would be a serious crime. Thinking of Patriarch Manninger's dignity and ruthlessness, the Odin's leader's face immediately turned pale. Shea's words were still polite. He said that he drank half of it. In fact, of the 10 barrels of wine, there were at most 3 to 5 barrels left. This Odin's people were simple-minded and didn't think of the key point. "Since it was a tribute, why did you open it for us to drink? How could you blame us?" Seeing that the other party was afraid, Shea smiled bitterly and said, "I'm also in a difficult position. Originally, I gave this gift to please Patriarch Manninger and bring harmony between the 2 families. Now that the gift is gone, what do you want me to do? I don't want to make things difficult for everyone. After thinking about it, I came up with a good idea." "What?" Seeing that this Corsican noble young master had a way, the Odin's leader immediately asked. Shea pretended to be in a difficult position and said in a low voice, "When it comes to giving gifts, if you give too little, it won't be beautiful. Instead of giving too little, it's better not to give at all. Anyway, I have other gifts in the car. Why don't I make the decision and cross off these wines from the list of gifts? As for these barrels, throw them away on the spot. Let's just pretend that these wines never existed. How about it? Anyway, these are our subordinate. After the peace talks, I will naturally bring my people back. As for your subordinates, as long as you tell them to keep their mouths shut, Who will know about these things that don't exist in the first place? Just treat it as me making a friend of you. How about it? During the peace talks, please put in a few good words for me." When the Odin's people heard this, they immediately laughed. They looked at Shea and said with a smile, "Not bad, not bad. You Byzantium people are interesting. Originally, seeing that your face was as white as a corpse, the Lao Tzu didn't like you. But your words are quite pleasant to hear." The Odin's people looked at Shea with slanted eyes. At this moment, he only cared about agreeing. As for the peace talks, he was just a small captain of 100 men. How could he have the right to interrupt? But there was no harm in agreeing to this Corsican noble young master first. But then, the Odin's people laughed again and said, "The barrels have been thrown away, so it's easy to deal with. But there are still a few barrels left." "Don't tell me." Shea laughed and said, "Look, it's still early. Everyone, rest here. Let's enjoy the remaining wine and then go on our way. After we enter the city, if you don't say anything, I won't say anything, hee. The Odin's people were overjoyed and immediately agreed. They turned back and ordered their subordinates to stop and rest by the side of the road. Shea also ordered the mounted gangsters to bring out the remaining wine barrels and distributed them for the Odin's people to enjoy. These Odin's people had already eaten several meals of Shea's people along the way. It was not a big deal to eat one more meal. Moreover, they were only a few dozen miles away from their strategic town. What was there to worry about? More than 100 Odin's warriors could only get 4.5 barrels of good wine. With the usual tolerance of the Odin's people, they could not get enough and almost fought over it. After the wine entered their mouths, Shea also ordered some livestock meat from the carriage to go with the wine. This made the eating and drinking even smoother. The Odin's people gathered together and were eating and drinking happily. However, some people found it strange. When they were eating and drinking, these Corsican people were drinking and drinking with them. However, at this moment, they did not come over to grab the food. Instead, they were all watching from the side. Later, the food gradually ran out and the wine barrels were almost empty. However, the Odin's leader was a little embarrassed. He had eaten and drunk other people's food, so he had to show some appreciation. He personally carried a helmet filled with wine to Shea and said with a smile, "I feel a little sorry for just watching us eat and drink. This Corsican brother, let's drink together." Shea stood there and smiled with squinted eyes. "For the first few meals, we can eat and drink together. But for the last few barrels of wine, I have already added something. You can drink, but we can't." As soon as he finished speaking, the Odin's leader felt that something was wrong. When he was about to say something, a gust of wind blew over. He only felt dizzy and his legs were weak. He sat on the ground with a thud, and the helmet in his hand was thrown aside. At this moment, the Odin's people who were sitting there eating and drinking had already lost their balance. Some were confused and were just at a loss. How could they drink so much that they became so dizzy in such a short time? Some of the Odin's people who reacted quickly felt that something was wrong. However, when they wanted to stand up, they fell down softly with a little strength. Only a few people who drank less and ate more meat struggled to get up and went to grab their weapons. "Brothers, let's get to work." Shea stood there with his arms crossed and smiled softly. Many horse bandits next to him pulled out their swords and rushed forward with a grim smile. There were no screams and almost no resistance. More than 100 Odin's people had already fallen to the ground and were easily slaughtered like pigs and sheep. The remaining ones who could barely resist were killed by a round of crossbows under the attack of many horse bandits. Shea looked at the sky and immediately said, "Move faster! Time to work." Many horse bandits were busy. In the woods by the road, they rearranged the bodies of the Odin's people and then unloaded them. In those big carriages, there were originally some corpses of the Corsica governor's mansion's guards. One of the corpses was that poor dead young master. They left most of the corpses, but only the dead young master's body was brought to the carriage. Shea took off his clothes again and deliberately stained them with blood. He asked a horse bandit to pinch his nose and put the clothes back on the badly damaged dead young master's body. Finally, everyone got on their horses and abandoned all the carriages. Then, they collectively lit a fire in the woods. Shea led everyone to gallop towards the Luoluo River at full speed. After the fire was lit in the woods, it took a while for the distant Odin's people to discover it. When the patrolling Odin's soldiers came to check, Shea and the rest had already run far away. When the patrolling soldiers of the Odin's people saw the scene clearly, it was a mess. There were carriages that were half burnt and corpses on the ground. Some were their own people, some were wearing Corsican military uniforms. This was no small matter. Odin's people actually saw more than 100 of their own soldiers die in their own territory, and there were even corpses of Corsicans at the scene. Soon, thousands of reindeer cavalry rushed out of the city and chased after the horse tracks on the road. Shea led a group of horse bandits and galloped at full speed. In less than a day, they returned to the bridge at the Rollo River. There were still some Odin's troops stationed here. When they saw Shea and the rest returning so quickly, they were somewhat surprised. However, Shea led a large group of horse bandits and galloped from afar. When they reached the front, Shea suddenly shouted, "Avenge the young master!" With a whoosh, the large group of horse bandits rushed into Odin's troops guarding the bridge. Odin's people were originally few in number here. Originally, more than half of the troops were sent to supervise and escort Shea and the rest along the way, but they were all killed. At this moment, they were in a hurry to meet the enemy. However, Shea and the rest easily broke through and killed more than 10 of them. They then rushed to the bridge and crossed the river. The Corsican army on the other side of the river had been closely monitoring the situation. Seeing that their own army had broken through the Odin's defensive line and crossed the river, they could not help but be alarmed. They were the guards who had escorted the young master the day before. Shea led his troops across the bridge. After the chaos, the Odin's people behind them had already organized their troops and were about to cross the river to pursue and kill. Shea crossed the river and rushed to the front of the Corsican troop. He shouted at the top of his lungs, "Odin's people are cruel and greedy. They covet the gifts we sent and have evil thoughts at the sight of wealth. They killed the young master on the way. Brothers, avenge the young master. Kill these Odin's people." These Corsican troops were all stunned by Shea's shout. Before they could react, Shea had already rushed past their troops with his men. However, he stopped and threw the dead young master's body on the ground. Then, without stopping, he galloped to the side. The Corsican commander was so confused that he forgot to stop them for a moment. He hurriedly went up and asked his men to move the body back. The body was already beyond recognition, but the clothes and accessories on it were shocking. Who else would dress like this except for the young master? He wanted to stop Shea and the rest to ask about the situation, but the Odin's people had already crossed the river. He could only brace himself and organize his men to resist and stop them. For a moment, along the bridge, the two sides fought fiercely. Swords and knives were exchanged, and the killing was very enjoyable. However, Shea had already rushed past the river defense with his men and galloped along the small road. Along the way, they rushed past several sentry posts and villages. When they encountered a small garrison of Corsican troops, Shea did not stop. He just led his men and ran wildly, shouting along the way. He only said that the young master was killed by the greedy Odin's people and that he had to bring his men back to the governor's office to report the news. The troops on the way were all shocked by the news. They also saw the beacon fire on the distant riverside. It was obvious that the Odin's people had crossed the river and invaded. How could they dare to stop Shea? They just let Shea lead his men far away. This country bumpkin is too shameless. Ha ha. Please vote. Please vote, please vote. Little 5 is bowing here. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 301. Last night, I watched the third and fourth finals until dawn. I only went to bed in the morning and woke up tonight. If I continue to write, it will be late. Fortunately, the finals are tonight and the World Cup is about to end. My updates will be back to normal. Chapter 287. Bad news. In less than 3 days, the entire Corsica military region was shaken. That day, Shea led his men across the river and Odin attacked the Rollo River. The Corsican garrison on the other side of the river resisted with all their might. Odin's men did not have enough troops on the other side of the bridge, so they retreated after a while. Moreover, the Odin's men did not know why they fought. It was only because Shea and his men rushed across the bridge and fought randomly for a while that the conflict started. However, after Odin's men on the other side of the bridge retreated, in less than half a day, thousands of Odin's cavalrymen arrived. They were the pursuers who found the corpses at the strategic town. The Corsican garrison on the other side of the river was also a little confused. After repelling Odin's attack, before they could take a breather, Odin's men on the other side of the river rushed over again. This time, the Corsican garrison could not hold on. Originally, there were only 2 battalions of Corsican garrison in this stronghold, while Odin's men on the other side of the river had gathered more than 2,000 cavalrymen. Soon, Odin's men crossed the river and took over the stronghold, crushing the Corsican garrison. Then, Odin's men continued to pursue for 20 miles without rest. It was not until the nearby Corsican troops were ordered to come to support that the two sides confronted each other again. However, at this time, the conflict had already arisen and could no longer be concealed. The higher-ups on both sides were in a mess. In Corsica, the news of the death of the governor's eldest son, Cardoso, had reached the governor's mansion as fast as possible. It was said that when the old governor heard the news, he vomited blood and fainted on the spot. After waking up, the old governor burst into tears on the sickbed. After crying, he gritted his teeth and ordered all his subordinates to gather for a meeting. He even sent someone to summon his youngest son, Gaia, back to the city. 3 days later, when the corpse of Cardozo, the eldest son of the old viceroy, was transported to the viceroy's mansion, the old viceroy cried and fainted on the spot. After he was finally rescued, he issued an order: mobilize the entire military region. The governor's second son, Gaia, was the one who felt the most satisfied. When he first heard the news, he was shocked. He didn't expect that his frail brother would have the courage to go to Odin's place to negotiate in person. Then, he was overjoyed. Fortunately, Odin's greedy people killed him on the way. Now, his only threat was gone. Wouldn't the Corsica military region be his in the future? Therefore, with such thoughts in mind, Gaia appeared to be the most indignant. At such a time, he acted as if he had a close brotherly relationship with his brother and was the most active in organizing the army for revenge. No one would be bothered by such things with a dead person. Moreover, at this time, it was the best time to show his generosity. He could seize the opportunity to win over the hearts of more senior officials in the governor's mansion. Gaia acted quickly. He quickly ordered a regiment of cavalry under his command to rush from the second-tier cities to the front line of the Rollo River to support the front-line defenders. Soon, they had 2 big and small battles with Odin's people. Odin's people had already crossed the river and had no intention of retreating. However, at this time, the higher-ups of the Scarlet Snow Army, including Manningham and the rest, were in a complete mess. The eldest son of the governor of Corsica came to negotiate? Moreover, he was killed by his own subordinates who tried to rob him of his wealth. When he heard this news, Manningham's first reaction was to believe it. He was very clear about the temperament of his subordinate. Although the other party was the eldest son of the governor of Corsica, his soldiers had been too successful ever since they went south. They felt that these Byzantium sheep were too easy to bully and could be beaten however they wanted. What was the son of the governor of Corsica? In the eyes of most of the Odin's people, he was no more than a sheep. If he was killed, then he was killed. What was the fuss about? Moreover, Odin's people had always been fierce and barbaric. It was not strange for them to do something like this. However, as the details of the news were sent to him, Manningham realized that something was not right. First of all, there were more than 100 corpses of Odin's soldiers at the scene discovered. After investigation, it was found that these more than 100 Odin's soldiers were escorting and supervising the peace negotiation team along the way. Even if there was a conflict and both parties fought, these more than 100 Odin's soldiers were all killed? Not a single one was left alive. This was extremely abnormal. Moreover, the last news that Manningham received was that the peace negotiation team only had less than 200 people. A mere team of 200 people actually wiped out more than 100 Odin's soldiers? And they were all slaughtered so quickly that not a single one was left alive? How could these soldiers of his be so useless? If it was the other way around and the other party's people were all killed by his own people, there was still some possibility. Most importantly, the corpses found at the scene were all Odin's people, while the Corsicans' corpses were only a dozen. It was not that Shea did not want to bring more, but the car could not fit them. The death and injury ratio was as high as 10-1. Was the Corsican army so powerful? Even if these were the elites of the governor's residence, it was not to this extent, right? Manningham's first reaction was, "It's fake." But the problem was that soon news came from Corsica that this matter was actually true. The son of the governor of Corsica was really dead. And where was the corpse? There was irrefutable evidence. And Corsica confirmed that they had indeed sent the governor's eldest son to negotiate in person. Could it be that the governor of Corsica was deliberately looking for an excuse to start a war? But first of all, what good would it do the Corsicans to start a war? Second of all, even if they were looking for an excuse, they did not have to sacrifice their own son's life. This matter was too strange, and the key was that not a single one was left alive. The Corsican army had gathered quickly. An emblem group of cavalry had already rushed to the Rollo River to start a war, and 3 more emblem groups were following closely behind. It was said that the Corsican military had already mobilized the entire region, and the reserve soldiers had also begun to gather. Although Manningham racked his brains, he could not figure out how such an accident could happen. His original intention was not to start a war with the Corsicans. Manningham was not someone who did not see the big picture. The reason why Odin's invasion was so successful was because of the internal strife caused by the Byzantium rebels, and the Byzantium people were fighting among themselves endlessly. Manningham's side was now in an alliance with the Byzantium rebels, but once this alliance was broken, it would not benefit Odin's people at all. He was different from those hot-headed fellows under his command. Although Manningham looked down on the Byzantium army, he also saw the weakness of his side. Odin's people were too few after all. Manningham now occupied the territory of nearly 2 prefectures. With such a large area, it would take time for his army to spread out and digest such a large area. According to Manningham's plan, he would first occupy these 2 prefectures, then spend more than a year to digest them. Once he had a firm foothold, he would then seek for more. Although the initial phase was smooth, he was still a guest army in an enemy country. Even if he wanted to fall out with the Byzantium warlords, now was not a good time. Firstly, he had to wait until he had a firm foothold and digested the territory, or even migrate some tribal people from his country over to really control these territories. Secondly, he had to wait for these rebels to eliminate the Byzantium royal family. In that case, the Byzantine Empire would really lose its power, and would no longer be a threat to Odin. Although the rebels of Byzantine and the members of the Red Round Table Conference were still very united, they were still very strong. This was only temporary. Once the Byzantium royal family was eliminated, these people would soon fight among themselves. That would be the time for the Ottoman Empire to truly annex Byzantium. Therefore, because of these concerns, in the first few days, Manningham ordered the Ottoman army that had crossed the river to not move forward. They were to confront the Corsican army on the spot and not move forward. Manningham then immediately sent a messenger to the governor's mansion of Corsica. However, who knew that the old governor of Corsica, in his grief and anger, did not even see the messenger's face and directly sent people to chop the messenger into minced meat. When this news came back, the leaders of the Scarlet Snow Army were shocked and furious. However, at this time, Manningham was still unwilling to give the order to start a war. He still ordered the frontline troops to stay where they were. However, before he could think of another way, the Corsicans had already taken action. The 3 Corsican emblem groups finally met at the Rollo River. They gathered an army of more than 10,000 people and began a fierce counterattack. There were only about 2,000 Odin soldiers that crossed the river. Under the Corsicans' superior military strength, they finally could not resist. After a fierce battle, the Corsicans and Odin suffered more than 1,000 casualties. The Odin army could only retreat across the river. However, the Corsicans were not satisfied. The army immediately crossed the Rollo River and took over 4 of the Odin army's strongholds at the riverside. Then, 2 more Corsican emblem groups finally arrived. A complete army was stationed at the Rollo River, ready to march into the territory of Ilton. Manningham finally could not take it anymore. No matter how much he wanted to consider the big picture, at this time, the Corsicans' aggressive attitude made Manningham furious. In Manningham's eyes, the Corsican army was nothing. The 7th Army, the dignified central standing army of Byzantium, was annihilated by him. An entire division of the Corsican army had chased them across the river, even though he had been patient with them. Since the other party was unwilling to make peace, the Odin warriors' axes and blades were never afraid of strong enemies. Once the order to counterattack was given, the Odin army quickly mobilized thousands of soldiers from several strategic towns in Ilton and fiercely charged towards the Rollo River. Within 10 days, both sides had fought 3 fierce battles with casualties on both sides. Meanwhile, a reserve army of 30,000 men had been assembled in Corsica and were rushing to the front line. Manningham did not show any signs of weakness. He ordered for the Odin army to be transferred from all parts of the occupied territory. He gathered 15,000 Odin soldiers from 3 emblems and 3,000 reindeer cavalrymen to meet the enemy head-on. Crunch! Shea gnawed on an apple in his hand. He sat on the city wall and looked towards the south. He had already brought his men back to Meta City. This time, he brought 200 mounted bandits with him in disguise. When he went there, he had 200 mounted bandits. When he came back, he only lost less than 40 men. However, the result of the battle was extremely glorious. The only regret was that the bodies of his brothers who died in the battle were all burned on the spot, leaving no trace behind. However, these mounted bandits did not care about such details. At this moment, on Mesta's city gate tower, Shea looked towards the south in a daze for a while and muttered to himself, "Fight, fight. The more intense you fight, the happier I will be." At this time, 3 steps behind him, a dark-skinned but very handsome young man stood there. He carried a big bow on his back and wore the patterned armor of the Byzantine army. His originally young and immature face had a hint of calmness. This young man was the native of Zaku, Akai. He had experienced several battles with Shea. Although the scale of the battles was not large, he had gained a lot of experience. At this moment, he was no longer the little hunter in the tribe. Standing behind Shea and hearing Shea's muttering, Akai whispered, "Sir, will they fight?" Shea listened and laughed. He threw the apple core in his hand down the city wall and looked back at Ah Kai. That's for sure. The old governor of Corsica lost his son. If he can still tolerate it, then Lao Tzu will really be convinced by him. Even if he wants to take the overall situation into consideration, but for this kind of thing, if he doesn't even fart, if he still acts like a coward after losing his son, how can he raise his head in the future? You don't understand. Furthermore, once they start fighting, once a large-scale battle is started, it won't be easy to restrain ourselves anymore. In war, there will be casualties. Once there are casualties, the hatred will become bigger and bigger. Even if you want to stop, the people below won't let you. Akai listened and a hint of understanding flashed in his eyes. He thought for a moment and said slowly, "Then, sir, who do you think will win this battle? It's best if the Corsicans win and defeat the Scarlet Snow Army. Then, we can take the opportunity to take back the other territories in Moore County." Shea listened and frowned. Then, he shook his head firmly. "No, the Corsicans will lose. Manninger is very powerful, and the Scarlet Snow Army is also Odin's elite. It's not something the Corsicans can deal with. Manninger will hesitate at the beginning, but once he goes all out, the Corsicans will be defeated sooner or later. By then, I'm afraid that the Corsican military region will be swallowed by Manninger." Akai was a little unhappy. Wouldn't that be too easy for Odin's people? And let them take the opportunity to take over so many territories. Shea laughed. Lao Tzu is afraid that Manninger has too few territories. The bigger the territories in his hands, the happier Lao Tzu will be. Looking at Ah Kai's blank eyes, Shea snorted. Odin's people are fighting far away from the mainland. There are only so many soldiers, and they can't get any replenishment. If he takes over so many territories, he will have to divide his troops to guard them, right? With 50,000 people, after the battle, no matter how powerful Odin's people are, there will be at least 10,000 casualties, right? They had already taken over the county of Ilton and part of the county of Moore. If they were to take over the Corsica military district as well, with more than 40,000 people, they would have to split up and guard so many territories. The net was cast too wide, and it was inevitable that it would be weak. By then, Lao Tzu won't be afraid of him. Akai came to a sudden realization and smiled. "Not bad, not bad. My lord, this fist is hard to deal with when it's clenched. If it opens up and has 5 fingers, we won't be afraid." Shea patted Akai's head and looked at his body, smiling. "You have become a lot stronger, but it's a pity that you are still a little thin and weak. When you grow taller and bigger, I will let you become a cavalry." As they were talking, Akai suddenly pointed outside the city and exclaimed, My lord, look! There's a horse coming. It seems to be one of us." Shea looked into the distance. Sure enough, there was a horse coming from the north on the main road. The knight on the horse repeatedly waved his whip to urge the horse to move faster. Judging from his attire, he was dressed like a Byzantium cavalry. The horse quickly rushed to the bottom of the city. After entering the city, Shea, who was on the city wall, quickly heard the movement below. A guard led a travel-worn cavalryman up the city tower. The cavalryman's face was covered in dust. He was so tired that he could barely breathe. When he rushed to Shea, he almost fell to the ground. Shea went up and hugged him. "What's wrong?" Urgent military intelligence. Prefectural governor." After Corinthia died for the country, according to the laws of the Byzantine Empire, Shea was temporarily the acting prefectural governor of Moore County. The cavalryman took out a tube from his bosom. The tube was wet, obviously from his sweat. He gritted his teeth and said, "Lord Green ordered that this must be handed to you as soon as possible. I brought 2 horses with me, but one of them has already died on the way." When Shea heard this, his heart suddenly sank. If it weren't for the fact that this was an emergency, Mad Dog Green wouldn't have been in such a hurry. He quickly opened the tube and took out a letter. The ink on the letter was still intact. When Shea opened it, he saw Green's handwriting. This military intelligence was actually just a short sentence. 2 days ago, Odin's army appeared 5 kilometers outside of Denzel City. According to the report of the scouts, the flag should belong to Hastings's Black Flag Army. 5 kilometers outside of Denzel City. Odin's army. Black Flag Army, Hastings? When these words fell into Shea's ears, he suddenly felt his mouth go dry. His face changed dramatically. Damn it! Lao Tzu had to use up all his skills to deal with Manning and delay this old man. Hastings, that bastard. Didn't the Black Flag Army defeat the 6th Corps in the neighboring county in the east? Wasn't they busy seizing territory? Why did they come to Moore County? In theory, Moore County was the Scarlet Snow Army's attack route. Why did Hastings come and interfere? But no matter how many thoughts he had, no matter how confused he was, it was written in black and white that the Black Flag Army had appeared near Denzel City. Given Green's status, if he hadn't investigated the situation, he wouldn't have written such a letter. For a moment, Shea's mind was in a mess. He suddenly raised his head and stared at the military envoy in front of him. When you came out, what did Green say? What do you want me to do? Lord Green said that you can decide on how to deal with this. Please vote. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 302. Sorry. It took me an entire month to adjust to watching soccer from day to night. Make 2 promises. Within this month, I will not ask for leave and I will not skip my ticket. The second promise. Within this week, starting tomorrow, I will write 8,000 words every day. GOR Chapter 288. Purple Eyes Self-determination? Shea froze on the spot. What the hell is this Green doing? This is such a big matter, yet he is not making any decisions. Instead, he wants Lao Tzu to decide on his own? Decide on my own head. What is wrong with that Hastings fellow? Why did he come all the way to Lao Tzu's Moore County? Me decide on my own? How am I supposed to decide on my own? How am I supposed to deal with Hastings when I'm short of soldiers? Hastings is not as easy to deal with as Manninger. Shea's brows were knitted together as he stood there, gnashing his teeth. Akai and the others who were beside him observed the expression on Shea's face, and they felt apprehensive. Akai whispered, "Sir, could it be that something has happened in Denzel City?" Hearing that, Shea's eyes glinted. He took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. Then, he turned to look at the people beside him. In addition to Akai, the soldiers on the city walls were also looking at him. Ha ha ha! No matter how anxious Shea was, he put on a normal smile on his face. He glanced at Akai and said, "What are you making wild guesses for? What kind of change could happen in Denzel City?" That Green said that if the problem with Odin's men is solved, would he allow the people from the villages and towns to return to their homes and farm? Son of a bitch, back then, he was the one who set the land on fire. Now, he is bothering Lao Tzu with this matter. Despite saying that, there was a trace of sharpness in his eyes as he looked at Akai. Akai was stunned at first, but then a trace of understanding flashed across her face. She quickly shut her mouth and stopped talking. Shea laughed out and ordered his men to send the envoy from Denzel City to rest. After that, he pretended to leisurely walk up and down the city walls. His expression was as calm as ever and he did not appear anxious at all. Along the way, he greeted the soldiers, patted them on their shoulders and thumped them on their chests. He gave them a few words of encouragement before walking away. It was not until they reached the bottom of the city that Akai, who was following closely behind Shea, gradually realized that the footsteps of the Lord in front of her were getting heavier and heavier. After taking a few steps, Shea looked back and saw that Akai was the only one following beside him. He sighed softly and said, "Akai, son of a bitch, do you think the heavens are blessing me or torturing Lao Tzu?" Looking at Akai's blank face and seemingly at a loss, Shea laughed, but his smile was a little bitter. He said in a low voice, "Sometimes Lao Tzu really wants to take off this skin and go deep into the mountains to be a hunter and live a carefree life. Son of a bitch, the days now are indeed good, but it is also too damn exciting." The governor's residence in Mesta City was originally badly damaged when Odin's men attacked and occupied it last time. During the battle when Shea recaptured Mesta City, the governor's residence was burned again. After the recapture, Shea only cared about repairing the city's defenses and did not care much about the governor's residence. He did not have enough troops under his command and there were not many guards in the governor's residence. He only left behind 20 men who were originally mercenaries to follow him. There was not even a servant in the residence. Even food and clothing had to be taken care of by Master Shea himself. After returning to the governor's residence, Shea sat in the hall and did not summon any guards. He also allowed Akai to follow him and did not send the boy away. He just sat down on the chair and held his head as he began to think hard. Hastings, the Black Flag Army, Odin's men, Odin's invasion to the south this time was divided into 3 routes. One route in the east was Hastings's Black Flag Army. After taking care of the 6th Corps, they occupied a county on the northeastern border of the empire. The middle route was Manninger's Scarlet Snow Army. They came down from the Wildfire Plains and went south along Moore County. They defeated the 7th Corps in Ilton County. The west route was said to be led by the first prince of the Odin Empire's divine emperor himself. He took 10,000 elites from the royal family and 40,000 warriors from various tribes to form a mixed army. Going south from the west route was the slowest. However, because there was no central standing army stationed in the northwestern part of the empire, they could only rely on the resistance of the local garrison. Odin's army on the west route was the smoothest. However, all this time, the 3 routes of Odin's army did not interfere with each other. Especially here in Moore County. According to Odin's invasion to the south, this should be the territory of the Scarlet Snow Army. Hastings rashly led his army into Moore County. Was this not an act of overstepping his authority? If it was in the past, this was simply an act of snatching credit from an ally. Was he not afraid of causing internal strife? Or was it that Hastings already knew of his little tricks in Moore County and came to deal with him first? Could it be that there was a traitor in his own army? Did he report the news to Hastings? But this did not seem right. His counterattack on Metter City had succeeded and he had gathered more than 10,000 troops. It was enough to pose a threat to Odin's invasion of Manninger's tribe in the middle route. If there was really a traitor in his own army who colluded with the Odins, why didn't he directly report it to Manninger? Why did he collude with Hastings? With so many messy thoughts floating in his mind, Shea felt that he was in a mess and did not know where to start. After thinking for a while, he suddenly slapped his thigh and whispered to himself, "Damn it! Why am I thinking so much? No matter what the reason is, Hastings is already here. The most important thing now is how to deal with it." After throwing away those distracting thoughts, Shea felt that the thoughts in his mind suddenly became clear. There were nothing more than 2 paths in front of him. 1. Defend Metter City. 2. Lead the army to reinforce Denzel City. He only had 10,000 troops. If Hastings really did send his army to attack, his forces were already at a disadvantage to begin with. Splitting his forces to station in 2 places would be an even more foolish act. By concentrating 10,000 troops in one place, there might be a possibility of repelling the enemy. However, the question was, where should he choose to station? Denzel City? Or Metter City? The advantage of Denzel City was that its walls were tall and sturdy. It was originally built according to the standards of a military fortress. As the bridgehead closest to the wildfire plains in the northern part of the empire, it had always been the largest military stronghold in Byzantium's fight against Odin's army. The city walls were tall and its defensive system was complete. There were also some military supplies left behind from last year's war. From a purely tactical point of view, Denzel City's defensive system was more suitable for defense. However, Medr City was the capital city of Moore County. The size of the city was much larger compared to Denzel City, and its population was also higher. Additionally, Medr City's geographical location was more important compared to Denzel City. As the capital city, Medr City was located in the center of Moore County's grain-producing region. The surrounding areas of the city were the most fertile lands of Moore County. The surrounding villages and fields were the essence of Moore County. It could be said that defending Medr City was equivalent to having half of Moore County in their hands. However, Medr City's defensive system was much worse compared to Denzel City. From a purely tactical point of view, it was not an easy place to defend but hard to attack. Additionally, Medr City was the capital city, the symbol of power in Moore County. Occupying Medr City, no matter how one looked at it, would greatly benefit Moore County's rule. Shea pondered for a long time. He was hesitant and was unable to make a decision. In the end, he exhaled deeply and raised his head. However, he saw that Akai was still standing before him. This youngster had been standing there while Shea was in a daze. "Why are you still here?" Shea raised his eyebrows. "Awaiting your orders." Shea stood up and walked around the hall twice. Then, he suddenly looked at Akai and said, "Let me ask you a question. Do you think Medr City is more important or Denzel City is more important?" Hearing that, Akai's expression turned serious for a moment before replying, "Denzel City." Shea was surprised. He did not expect Akai's answer to be like that. In Shea's mind, Medr City was more important. It was just that the city's defensive system was not that good. "Why?" Akai did not hesitate and immediately replied, "My lord, I only know that Denzel City is your territory." This immediately reminded Shea of something. His official position was the military officer of Moore County and the consul of Denzel City. Looking at it this way, Denzel City was his true headquarters. If it was during peacetime, he would never have the right to come to Medr City and give orders. Is there any other reason? Also, Akai lowered his head and thought for a moment before continuing, "Denzel City is next to the wildfire plains. If we can't beat them, we still have a place to run." If it was another general who heard this, he would have immediately reprimanded Akai. The war had not yet started and he was already thinking about running away. In the entire empire, only that rabbit general, Ruhr, would have such thoughts. When Shea heard that, his eyes suddenly lit up. The wildfire plains, if they were to be stationed in Medr City. Indeed, if they were to lose their momentum in the end, they would not even have a place to retreat. They would be surrounded by enemies. But if they were to be stationed in Denzel City, even if they could not defend it in the end, they could still retreat to the wildfire plains. "Pass down the order." Shea's expression turned solemn. "Have all the battalion-level officers come to the county governor's office for a meeting." Goldhorn City was located in the southern part of Asriya County. If one were to head north from Goldhorn City, there would be Silverhorn City after 50 miles. After crossing Silverhorn City, one would enter Ilton County. At present, Ilton County had been occupied by Odin's Scarlet Snow Army, but Asriya County had not been attacked by the vanguard. Asriya County was originally a central administrative district in the northern part of the empire. It was one of the areas under the central rule of the empire. But in the early stages of the Civil War, a rebel force bordering Asriya County directly sent troops to invade. Asriya County originally only had a few local garrison forces, so they were no match for the rebel army. After a symbolic resistance for a while, the county governor became a coward. After receiving the rebel army's promise, he quickly surrendered. The current ruler of Asriya County was one of the members of the Red Round Table, the Besta military district. The Besta military district was also one of the first military districts to respond to the rebellion in the early stages of the Civil War. At the same time, they were also one of the staunchest allies of Salvatore, the chairman of the Red Round Table. After occupying Asriya County, the Besta rebel army stopped expanding. They sent troops to occupy various key passes, took over various towns, and replaced them with their own officials to govern. At the same time, they also cooperated by sending 5 emblem regiments to be stationed at the northern border near Ilton County. This was to maintain a threatening stance towards the 7th Division in Ilton County. When the 7th Division was annihilated by Odin's Scarlet Snow Army, Odin's people quickly reached an agreement with the rebel army. The Besta rebel army also withdrew, leaving only 2 emblem regiments stationed at the border. After the city defense troops and officials of Goldhorn City were replaced with the Besta military district's people, the affairs of the city did not change much. The original county governor was not a good official. After a few years in office, he did not show any favors to the people. That was why the people of Asriya County were not dissatisfied with the change of ruler and did not riot. Goldhorn City now looked peaceful. Other than the fact that the imperial eagle flag was no longer hung on the city walls, and the soldiers patrolling the streets were replaced with the rebel army of the Besta military district, there were not many changes. Even the shops in the city were operating as usual. However, due to the war, the roads to the north and south were cut off, so it seemed a little desolate. In a tavern by the road, Bob of Dax sat by the window of a room on the 2nd floor and looked out the window. He slowly explained the current situation in Asriya County. Daphne and Adeline sat opposite him, listening to this fellow talk about the current situation in the northern part of the empire as if he knew it like the back of his hand. Adeline did not react, but Daphne was getting more and more shocked as she listened. After all, she was born in the Minas family, an aristocratic family of famous generals. Her father and brother were both in the military. She had been influenced by them since she was young. She was not an idiot who only had good looks. When she saw that this mysterious man in front of her knew so much, she could not help but feel a little afraid. During the war, many roads were cut off. Even the Imperial Intelligence Agency in the imperial capital might not be so clear about this information. How did this man in front of her know so much? After Bob of Dax finished a bottle of wine, he smiled and said, "I heard that the Besta military region's governor isn't very capable, but he has a very capable wife. I heard that his wife is very resourceful." When the Civil War started, Governor Besta was still hesitating whether he should respond, but his wife insisted that he immediately mobilize his troops and quickly conquer Asriya County. That idea was also proposed by the governor's wife. In less than a month, the Besta military region doubled in size. After conquering Asriya County, the rebels did not invade and did not harass the local government. They only replaced their own consul and didn't disturb the people, so the possibility of conflict was minimized. They didn't cause any trouble and didn't spend much effort to gain control of Asriya County. I heard that the governor's wife was the one who came up with all these ideas. That woman is not simple. Dax drank a glass of wine, his eyes revealing a hint of malice. And I heard that the governor's wife is also a great beauty. When the governor was young, he was a womanizer, but after marrying this beauty, he became obedient. He listened to his wife's every word and did not disobey her. If it wasn't for the governor's wife's beauty, she probably wouldn't have been able to win his heart. A great beauty with both beauty and intelligence. I really want to meet her one day. Daphne pursed her lips and carefully sized up Dax. This fellow's eyes were hazy and he looked like a pig. However, Daphne had deeply felt the terror of this man after interacting with him for the past few days while they were fleeing north. Everywhere they went, that man would first find a place for the two girls to settle down. Then, he would go out alone and find a way to escape by the time he returned. There seemed to be people cooperating with him everywhere and listening to his orders. He was always able to find the safest carriage and even bribe the guards to let him pass. It was as though everywhere they went, there would be hidden forces listening to his orders. In fact, a few days ago, when they were passing through a city occupied by the rebel army, the three of them disguised themselves as members of the clergy of the religious institute to deceive the guards. At that time, the three of them were hiding in one of the transport caravans of the religious institute. That fellow actually had spies in the religious institute. Back then, that fellow had casually found a nun from the religious institute. After the nun took off her hat, she slapped Dax's face. However, Dax did not care. He went forward to hug the nun and kissed her madly. In the end, the nun turned into a docile kitten before him. Seducing a nun was a serious crime for the church. That nun also seemed to listen to every word of that man. She even personally arranged their escape route. When they arrived at Goldhorn City, he used some unknown method to sneak the three of them into a transport caravan and easily entered the city. Even the city guards did not search them, and they simply swaggered in. "Your beautiful highness, why are you looking at me like that? Is there a flower growing on my face?" Daphne was lost in her thoughts when she suddenly heard Dax's words. Then, she saw the man moving closer with a grin on his face. She quickly frowned and turned her head away. Could it be that your highness has found me to be extraordinarily handsome and has developed feelings of admiration for me?" Dax maintained his grin on his face. However, he then pulled at his hair and said in distress, "Aya, what should I do? Two great beauties, one is beautiful and intelligent while the other has a pair of beautiful legs that I like the most." After saying that, he turned his face toward Adeline. "Your beautiful highness, seeing that I have worked hard to escort you all this way, how about letting me touch your legs as a reward?" "Go to hell." Adeline was furious. She grabbed the plate on the table and threw it at him. Dax caught it and was about to say something when his face suddenly changed and became abnormally serious. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the stairs. A strange sound of footsteps came from the stairs. It seemed to be somewhat heavy and sluggish. However, the sound seemed to have a strange rhythm to it. Then, a figure slowly walked up from the bottom of the stairs. The most eye-catching thing was a head of long purple hair. The slender figure was wrapped in a long black cloak. There was half an iron mask on the figure's face. There was also a strange-looking longbow on the figure's back. When Dax saw the figure, he immediately sat down and narrowed his eyes. There was no need to ask. The person who came up the stairs was naturally Vaya. Vaya had just walked up the stairs when he suddenly stopped at the top of the stairs. There weren't many people on the second floor of the tavern. The most eye-catching person was naturally a man and a woman sitting near the window. Dax was dressed casually and had delicate features. As for the two beauties, although they had put on some makeup to hide their beauty, they still had a graceful bearing and inevitably attracted attention. Vaya stood at the top of the stairs and looked over. Suddenly, he saw the backs of Daphne and Adeline. His purple eyes flashed with a strange light. Her cold and elegant face did not change, but she slowly walked over step by step, and then sat down by a table at the side. With a bang, a longbow was slammed on the table. He saw that her hand was still holding the bow. She sat there, but her eyes were fixed on Dax. The two of them were separated by a table. They looked at each other like this, their eyes flashing. Daphne and Adeline also noticed that something was wrong. They were both surprised by Via's strange attire. However, they saw that Dax's smiling face was replaced by an unprecedented stern expression. "Have you seen enough?" Via spoke first. When that cold voice fell into the ears of others, it was as if it carried a chill, making them feel cold all over. Dax sighed softly. I've seen enough. You walked a total of 13 steps up the stairs, right? In 13 steps, you have already adjusted your aura to its best state. As he said that, Dax smiled bitterly. Dear Vaya, compared to the last time we met, you've become much stronger. Vaya didn't say anything. He only tightened his grip on the bow. Dax chuckled. Looks like the heavens really want to make things difficult for me. I just randomly found a tavern and I actually bumped into you. Did you come from the north or the south? Vaya frowned and didn't answer. Instead, his eyes fell on the two girls beside Dax. After looking at them for a while, Via's face turned even uglier. She took a deep breath and stared at Dax. She only spat out a few words. Let them go immediately. Dax laughed dryly and rubbed his nose. Looking at the two girls' strange expressions, he sighed and said, Your Highnesses, do you not recognize this ice beauty? She is a very famous and powerful character in the Byzantine Empire. His tone gradually became serious. One of Mr. Cavishier's most outstanding disciples. She is also the only disciple that Mr. Cavishier has ever taught. The famous Purple Eye. If you want to know what happens next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 303. Sigh, adjusting to the time difference is so difficult. Day and night are always reversed. This should be an update on the 14th. 4,000 words. I know how many words I still owe. There are still 4,000 words per chapter and 8,000 words on the 15th. No matter what, I will update another 12,000 words before 11:59 p.m. on the 15th. It's not that I'm lacking in updates, it's just that day and night are reversed. My schedule is now the complete opposite of everyone else's. No matter what, I will have to grit my teeth and do my best today. GOR Chapter 289 Black Flag. Although Daphne and Adeline had never seen Vaya before, after hearing Dax's introduction, they knew that she was Cavishier's disciple. Daphne knew more than Adeline. Cavishier was the most important pillar of support for the Byzantium royal family. Additionally, she vaguely knew that Cavishier seemed to possess some mysterious power that allowed him to complete some special missions for the Empire. Hearing that the cold-looking woman in front of her was Cavishier's disciple, Daphne's heart skipped a beat. She could not help but feel hopeful. Although the two girls had been fleeing with Dax all this time, they knew that this mysterious man was definitely not someone from the Byzantine Empire. Additionally, his attitude toward the Byzantine Empire was not very friendly. He was also not very respectful toward the two royal highnesses. However, he was the one who rescued the two girls. Since there was no one else around to protect them, they could only flee together with him. In the end, however, they did not feel at ease with him. Now that a disciple of Cavishier had appeared before them, a mysterious man and a disciple of Cavishier, there was no need to doubt who they should choose. Clearly, if they could leave with this disciple of Mr. Cavishier, it would be much safer than following this unknown man. Via's expression remained cold as he stared at Dax. Here or out? Popov sighed. He suddenly raised his hands and pressed down on Daphne's shoulders as she was about to stand up. With this gentle press, Daphne immediately felt half of her body go numb, and she sat back down. My dear Vaya. Dax's tone was leisurely. Aren't you afraid that fighting in this city will alert the guards? You and I naturally aren't afraid of escaping, but I'm afraid these two princes won't be able to escape so easily, right? Vaya snorted. He just sat there and raised his eyebrows slightly. Hey, what are you saying? Are you trying to kidnap us? Don't forget, you promised to escort us. Adeline could hear the tension in their words and was about to reprimand them, but halfway through, she felt Daphne tugging at her hand. Looking up, he saw Daphne gently shaking her head at him. I don't like to give up halfway. Dax shook his head. Right now, I'm the protector of these two beautiful princesses. Vaya took a deep breath, a light flashing in his eyes, but he finally nodded. You're right. It's not good to fight in the city. After saying that, he actually stood up. His gaze swept over Daphne and Adeline, and he nodded slightly before turning around and walking towards the stairs. Wait a moment. Dax spoke up again. Are you hurt? I've told you many times, using that kind of archery too much is harmful to your body. Killing people is no problem. Vaya didn't even look back as he walked down the stairs. After Vaya left, Dax finally let go of his hand on Daphne's shoulder. He let out a soft sigh, grabbed the bottle of wine on the table, and took a sip. Unlucky, unlucky! Why did I run into this icy woman here? Adeline's pretty face was filled with anger as she glared at Dax. I knew you weren't a good person. So you were also planning to kidnap us? Dax rolled his eyes. I'm not a subject of the Byzantine Empire, and I'm not loyal to the Byzantium imperial family. Why should I listen to your orders? Besides, Lao Tzu hasn't gotten his reward yet. Humph. You're not even willing to let me touch your beautiful legs. Adeline's face turned red with anger. If not for the fact that she knew she wasn't this guy's match, she would have already, in her memory, even when she was by that country bumpkin's side, she had never been so angry. Daphne stared at Dax. What are you planning to do with us? Of course I'm going to continue being your protector. Dax shamelessly gave such an answer, and then smiled sinisterly. What? That person just now, huh? You think that Cavashir is really that loyal to your Byzantium imperial family? Dax shook his head. You might not be better off in her hands than in mine. Seeing that Adeline was still looking at the stairs, Dax put down the bottle of wine. No need to look. Don't worry, she'll come and take you away again. This woman has a tough personality and is the most difficult opponent Lao Tzu has ever met. She didn't make a move just now because we're in the city. If we fight, we'll expose ourselves and we won't be able to leave. Humph, the rest of our journey will be very lively. Adeline gritted her teeth. It's best if she comes and saves us soon. Saves? Dax's smile became more and more complicated. He looked at Adeline and suddenly sighed. He turned to look at Daphne. Dear Crown Princess, has this little princess always been so childish? She's so immature. She seems to think that I'm a bad person and that woman is a good person? Save? That's not the right word. After a pause, Dax whispered, It's not wrong to say that she's here to steal you. But Save, that's not the case. What do you mean? Adeline stared. What do I mean? I just want to tell you that good and bad people are not written on the face. Dax smiled, but then he leaned over and said, How about it? I've told you such a valuable piece of philosophy. As a reward, can you consider stretching out those beautiful legs of yours and letting me touch them? Adeline immediately blushed. I don't think you're a good person. The three of them quickly left the city from the north gate. They didn't know what method Dax used, but when they left the city gate, he pulled out a pass from his pocket like a magic trick. They didn't know when he got this thing, but it had the stamp of the Besta military district on it. After leaving the city, the three of them rode on the main road to the north. Dax chose to take the smaller roads. After walking for less than an hour, he suddenly smiled and said, Your Highness the long-legged beauty, the person you've been waiting for is here. The three of them looked back and saw a slender figure wrapped in a cloak at the back of the road. Her purple hair fluttered as she slowly followed them step by step. Weya's footsteps were a little unsteady, limping strangely. It was obvious that it was very difficult for her to walk. With every step she took, she looked like she was going to fall at any time. However, she kept a distance of about 30 meters behind the three people on horseback. She didn't fall behind at all, not a bit more, not a bit less. After walking for a while, he looked back and saw that Weya was still 30 meters behind him. Not a minute more, not a minute less. Humph. Dax suddenly pulled on the reins and pulled out a short sword from his bosom. He urged the horse to slowly move to the side of the road and casually reached out to grab a few tree branches. The short sword in his hand suddenly exploded with a golden light. With a swish, the tree branches were cut into several pieces and fell to the ground. However, they didn't deviate from their original position and actually stuck right into the ground. Let's go. Dax's face showed a trace of cold arrogance. He turned his head and urged his horse to continue forward with the two women. After running for a while, Adeline was curious. She looked back and saw that Vaya had already walked to the place where the branches were inserted. She was squatting down and carefully staring at the branches in a daze. She didn't know what she was looking at. It was as if there was something profound about the cut branches that needed to be studied. After that, Vaya stood up again and continued to follow road, but this time, he adjusted his speed slightly, lengthening the distance between them to about 50 meters. When Dax saw that Vaya had increased the distance to 50 meters, he frowned instead. She's actually this confident? Dax's face became serious. After thinking for a while, he snorted and pulled out his short sword. He raised his hand and swung it. With a snap, he cut off a section of the horse's tail. A light breeze blew, and the cut-off horse's tail flew behind them. Dax sneered and continued to lead the two women forward. Vaya took a few steps, and the wind blew a few ponytails in front of her. She gently raised her hand and pinched one of the ponytails. She brought it close to her eyes and carefully looked at the position of the cut. After looking at it for a while, Vaya fell silent. She threw away the ponytail in her hand and slowed down again. The distance between the two sides was now about 60 meters, but Vaya was still following him at a steady pace. Dax's expression became more and more serious. These two, what are they doing? Adeline couldn't help but ask Daphne in a low voice. Their actions were strange, but she couldn't figure out what was going on. Daphne knew more than her and smiled bitterly. Testing. Testing? The crown princess had a worried expression. This guy cut off the branch and the horse's tail to show off his strength to Lord Cavishier's disciple, right? Cutting off a branch can show off his strength? Adeline didn't believe it. Daphne smiled bitterly. I don't know martial arts. However, I've heard people say that when martial skills are cultivated to a high level, experts don't even need to fight. They can roughly judge the depth of their opponent's strength from just a few clues. This guy cut off the branch, and Lord Cavishier's disciple behind him can judge the opponent's strength, speed, and skill level from the cut. Adeline didn't quite understand and was still a little confused. Daphne whispered, "This guy wanted to show off his sword skills to make the opponent retreat, but he didn't expect the woman behind him to not fear his sword skills at all." Adeline hated Dax and naturally wanted to leave his protection. In her heart, no matter what, Lord Cavishier's disciple was someone she could trust. After hearing Daphne's analysis, she clapped and laughed. "Ha! Looks like this guy is going to have a headache. That expert behind him isn't afraid of him at all." The conversation between the two women fell into Dax's ears. This guy's face had long changed from the frivolous smile from before to a gloomy one. Two childish women. He simply looked at Adeline and then at Daphne. "Your Highness' guess is somewhat reasonable, but I didn't want to show off my power to scare her away. This was just the first step of our competition." After a pause, he shook his head and said, "This ruthless woman and I have fought against each other countless times, and we both have a general understanding of each other's strength. But every time we meet again, after a period of time, we both naturally improve. This hidden battle just now was to test each other's strength." At this point, a trace of depression flashed across Dax's face. "Unfortunately, her improvement was greater than I expected. I thought I could force her to retreat 100 meters, but now she only retreated 60 meters. There was a trace of regret in his expression. Sigh, looks like I've been too comfortable and too wasteful during this time. Adeline didn't care about Dax's feelings and said rudely, looks like you lost the hidden battle just now? Dax scratched his head. I can't say that I lost, it was just a little beyond my expectations. After a pause, he glared at Adeline. Are you happy? Humph. Stupid woman, I've said it before, this guy is here to snatch people, not to save people. Ha! Ha! The knight's shouts to urge the horses came one after another, and the cavalry galloped north on the road. Shea was dressed in martial attire, and was at the front of the troop, with Akai behind him as the flag-bearer. The young Jack's riding skills were already quite good. He sat on the horse, holding the flagpole with one hand, and the eagle flag fluttered. Behind them was a long line of cavalry, like a long snake. The outline of Denzel City could be vaguely seen in front. Shea had considerable confidence in Green. With this famous general nicknamed Mad Dog in charge, even if Hastings really led his army to invade, Shea believed that Green would be able to resist for a while. However, Hastings's Black Flag army was famous after all, and there were too few troops in Denzel City. Thus, he felt uneasy along the way. When he saw the Empire's eagle flag fluttering above Denzel City, Shea finally breathed a sigh of relief. Denzel City was still there, nothing had happened. Behind them were thousands of mounted bandits and cavalry. In addition, there were also 5,000 infantrymen and 6,000 newly recruited soldiers far behind them. They were also advancing toward Denzel City without rest. When Shea finally decided to reinforce Denzel City, he might as well go all the way. He did not have many soldiers under his command to begin with. Since he had made the decision, he might as well not leave too many soldiers behind in Mesta City. At any rate, if Odin's men were to invade Denzel City, there would be no point in leaving any number of soldiers behind in Mesta City. There was no difference between leaving 200 or 300 soldiers behind and leaving 2,000 or 3,000 soldiers behind. Thus, it would be better for him to transfer out almost all of his soldiers and concentrate them on Denzel City. For this expedition, Shea had left behind less than 100 soldiers to defend Mesta City. Before leaving, Shea had secretly instructed the officer who was left behind to defend the city. If Odin's men were to invade Denzel City, they should be allowed to surrender without resisting. At any rate, 100 men would not be able to defend the city. Thus, they might as well not waste their lives. However, just as Shea's group of mounted soldiers was about to enter Denzel City, Shea, who was seated on his horse, suddenly glanced northeast. His face instantly sank. Northeast of the city, a small group of mounted soldiers slowly emerged from a forest far away. Clearly, they were Odin's mounted soldiers. However, they were not riding on reindeer. Instead, they were riding horses. From afar, it would appear that there were not many of them. There were only 100 or so mounted soldiers. However, among the 100 or so mounted soldiers, one of them was holding a flag. A black flag. Hastings, you finally came. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 304. GOR Chapter 290. Hastings's motive. After Shea led his army into the city, he immediately went to the garrison to meet up with Green. When they met up, Green's expression was calm. When he saw Shea, he gave a faint smile and said, "Oh, you are back." Shea took off his helmet and casually tossed it to a guard. Then, he pulled Green and strode into the garrison. Along the way, he could not stop himself from asking, "Just what is going on? Tell me everything in detail." Green's expression was calm and he did not appear nervous. Rather, he appeared somewhat relaxed. He simply glanced at Shea and said, "I thought you would choose to stay behind and defend Meta City." Hearing that, Shea was slightly taken aback. He shook his head and said, I did think about it. However, Metter City's location is not good. If I were to defend it, I would fall into a desperate situation. Sigh. After entering the meeting room, Shea sat down and said, All right, I am very anxious. Hurry up and tell me. Green nodded his head and said with a calm expression, All right. He glanced at the guards beside him and said, All of you leave. After everyone had left, Green's face gradually turned solemn. He looked at Shea and said, Do you know? You have taken a very dangerous step. What do you mean? Green shook his head and said, In the letter I gave you, I did not tell you what to do. I only sent someone to tell you to decide. That's right. Shea knitted his brows and looked at Green. I am also puzzled. This is such an important matter. Why didn't you give me any advice? Because I don't know what to do. Green smiled bitterly. Shea was stunned. Green's military strategy was top-notch and Roer highly praised him. Not to mention, he was a rare, famous general among the Eagle Division generals. His past military achievements could be said to be brilliant. However, when Green said that there was nothing he could do, Shea did not believe him. Sigh, listen to me first. Green's expression shook as he slowly said in a deep voice, 7 days ago, our scouts encountered Black Flag Army scouts about 20 li northeast of the city. However, the two sides did not come into contact with each other. They only saw each other's banners, and both sides withdrew. This is my order. Send scouts out of the city to patrol. If you encounter any enemy, there is no need to come into contact with them. You only need to quickly report the situation. Yes, and then? Green took a deep breath. At that time, after I received the report, I immediately dispatched several hundred cavalry troops to patrol the northeast. As a result, within 3 days, we encountered the Black Flag Army 4 times in succession. Both sides still didn't come into contact. However, there is a phenomenon that puzzles me. What? Green gave a wry smile and said, The first time we discovered them, they were 20 li northeast of the city. The second time, they were 30 li away from the city. The last few times, they were all 50 li away from Denzel City. The furthest one was when our scouts ran all the way to the border of Moore County. Only then did they see the Black Flag Army's mounted patrols from afar. Shea was also puzzled. This phenomenon was indeed puzzling. Generally speaking, when marching to war, the scouts were the eyes of the main army. If the scouts were discovered, then the distance between the main army of the enemy should not be too far. Moreover, the Black Flag Army had actually run all the way to Moore County. Then, according to normal reasoning, they would not only send out 100 mounted patrols. There would certainly be a large army following behind them. If Hastings had discovered the existence of a resistance force from the Byzantine Empire, then he would have sent out a large army to wipe them out. If so, why was the distance between them increasing each time? It would appear as though the Black Flag Army was retreating step by step, while their scouts were advancing step by step. The Black Flag Army's scouts had already searched until they were less than 20 li away from Denzel City. So, why did they gradually retreat? Normally speaking, Green continued, when we first encountered the Black Flag Army, I was not too surprised. After all, the remnants of the 6th Corps are here with us. At that time, the 6th Corps was defeated by the Black Flag Army and retreated to our place. Hastings was cautious in his actions. It was not strange for him to send out a few small teams to conduct a search. However, the strange thing was that if they were chasing after the remnants of the 6th Corps, then it would be impossible for them to only send out a few small teams. At the very least, they would have to send out 5,000 to 6,000 elite troops or even more. Moreover, after discovering us, they instead retreated further and further away. After that, I made a decision. I sent out several hundred mounted soldiers out of the city and decided to conduct a power search to make contact with these Black Flag Army's mounted soldiers. Shea nodded his head. In the past, he had also worked as a scout in the Roadrear cavalry. He knew that the so-called power search was actually sending out a small group of mounted soldiers to search for the enemy. If they encountered a small group of enemies, they would go up and make contact. The so-called contact was a small-scale battle. 100 mounted soldiers would encounter each other. Both sides would fight to probe the enemy's attitude. In the end, after I sent out several hundred mounted soldiers, as expected, we discovered the Black Flag Army again in the northeast. However, this time, the Black Flag Army did not seem to have any intention of retreating. Instead, they fought a fierce battle with our people. Both sides suffered some losses, but generally speaking, they were evenly matched. However, the Black Flag Army's attitude this time made me very surprised. The other side fought very fiercely and also very unyieldingly. They did not show the slightest sign of cowering. In the end, both sides suffered losses and retreated separately. After this power search, the Black Flag Army did not retreat. Instead, they advanced. In the following 2 days, the Black Flag Army's mounted soldiers would frequently appear in the surrounding area. Moreover, they were getting closer and closer to Denzel City. There was even one time when over 100 mounted soldiers had already run to the side of a forest that was a stone's throw away from the city. I tried to capture a few tongues back, but these Odin's people are very fierce. Several small-scale battles occurred, and we were unable to capture a single captive. If the other side is not a match for us, they would just run far away. Green sighed. I don't have many mounted soldiers under me. Even if I wanted to set up a trap and get rid of a group of them, I couldn't do it. Shea rubbed his nose. Almost all of the mounted soldiers under his command had been brought to Metter City by him. The majority of Denzel City's defenders were infantry. It was no wonder that Green was helpless. It has already been almost 7 days. I can only see wave after wave of mounted soldiers. However, the Black Flag Army's main force has yet to appear. I am puzzled. I am also unable to guess what Hastings is trying to do. Green furrowed his brows. I originally suspected that Hastings was trying to bluff. I fear that the ones who came were only this small group of mounted soldiers. There is no main force. When the previous battle ended, they dared to fiercely fight against us. In fact, they were pretending to be unyielding. However, after thinking about it carefully, it doesn't make sense. What use is there for them to do this? After listening to Green's explanation, Shea's nervousness lessened by half. No matter what, since the Black Flag Army's main force had not come to invade, the situation had not yet reached the worst. He had accumulated this bit of resources with great difficulty. If he were to meet force with force against the Black Flag Army at this time, he would not be able to afford the losses. Shea sat there and pondered for a long time. Then, he smiled bitterly. Motherfucker, this matter is indeed strange. If Hastings wanted to attack us, the scouts these days would have already detected it. He would have just directly sent his main force over. What's the point of having this group of mounted soldiers scattered around, bluffing and bluffing, bluffing and bluffing, bluffing and bluffing? He suddenly slapped his thigh. You said bluffing and bluffing. That's actually a bit possible, but why? Green said steadily. Don't tell me he is counting on relying on a few hundred mounted soldiers to scare us into abandoning the city and running away? This is also impossible. We have already displayed an unyielding stance. The cavalry of both sides have also come into contact several times. If they want to scare us, then they should also understand that this is impossible. Green smiled bitterly. No matter what, these guys have always brought me a lot of trouble. I originally planned to have the people who had previously gathered in the surrounding villages and towns return to their homes. Summer is about to arrive. If we hurriedly cultivate at this time, we can still barely harvest a season's worth of grain before winter. But these guys from the Black Flag Army outside the city are harassing us like this, making it very difficult for me to do so." He sighed. "I also don't dare to make the decision to directly summon you back, because I also can't rule out a possibility. The Black Flag Army is deliberately tormenting us here to attract our attention. After you return, they want to mount a sneak attack on Metter City. Therefore, I can only let you decide on your own." Shea laughed. "All right. Since I can't guess anything, then I might as well not think about it for now. In any case, I've already returned. I brought back quite a few mounted soldiers. This time, if those Odin bastards come to harass us again, then I'll simply eat them up." Shea's idea actually wasn't bad. Previously, Green lacked mounted soldiers in his hands and had no way to deal with these Black Flag Army's mounted soldiers. But now that Shea had brought back a large number of mounted bandits, the city had sufficient mobility. Shea planned to ruthlessly fight a battle. In the afternoon of that day, a soldier reported that a small group of Odin's Black Flag Army cavalry had appeared in the woods outside the city. Shea immediately didn't stop. He directly led 500 mounted bandits to kill their way out of the city. The Odin's men in the woods northeast outside the city saw Shea's cavalry leaving the city from a distance. They immediately divided into two groups. A group of 30 to 50 mounted soldiers rapidly left the woods and headed northeast. The remaining 50 mounted soldiers assumed battle stances. Both sides fought a fierce battle. Those 50 Odin's mounted soldiers weren't the slightest bit afraid. They fought a fierce battle with the mounted bandits. In the end, they were all annihilated. Shea alone chopped off the heads of 7 or 8 Odin's men. But what made Shea gloomy was that these Black Flag Army soldiers were indeed valiant. They'd rather die than surrender. Even if they were injured, they still assumed a battle stance. They fought until the last person. All of them died on the spot. In the end, some people fell into desperate straits. They simply brandished their swords and slit their own throats. After a battle, not a single survivor was captured. This made Shea very angry. He even did a final inventory of the casualties. Even though they'd wiped out 50 Odin's mounted soldiers, they'd also lost more than 30 of their own men. In a situation where both sides' numbers were more than 10 times the enemy's, they'd still lost 30 men. It could be seen how valiant the Black Flag Army was. Shea stifled a bellyful of anger. But he'd only just returned to the city to rest for a night. The next day, over 100 Black Flag Army cavalry appeared outside the city. Shea once again led his men out. But this time, these Black Flag Army cavalry didn't meet force with Shea. When they saw Shea leading his men out, they turned around and left. Shea had a bellyful of anger. He chased them relentlessly until the sky darkened. They'd run for nearly 100 li. They'd almost reached the northeastern border of Moore County. If they continued forward, they'd cross Moore County and enter the neighboring county. Only then did Shea order them to stop. He watched as those over 100 Black Flag Army soldiers crossed the border and went far away. After returning to the city, Shea angrily said to Green, "Lao Tzu understands Hastings's scheme. This guy is deliberately disgusting us. Motherf *** Kerr. He's already discovered our strength. But because of some reasons, he doesn't have enough troops to deal with us. He can only dispatch a small group of cavalry to harass us incessantly, tormenting us until we're exhausted. Previously, we carried out a scorched earth strategy. His small group of cavalry came to harass us, making it so that our farmers can't return to their homes to cultivate. This delayed the season, making it impossible for us to produce food here. If we delay the time, sooner or later, we'll have the problem of food shortage." Green felt that Shea's words were somewhat reasonable, but he still had some doubts. If Hastings already knows our actual situation, then this kind of method is also somewhat reasonable. It's just that, apart from Denzel City, we still have Meta City. His harassment here isn't something we're afraid of. And there's also Meta City. The farmers in the surrounding land have already returned to their homes. In terms of food, there shouldn't be any problems. Motherf ** Cur. What does that Hastings want in the end? Shea was so angry that he laughed instead. Don't tell me that guy is bored and wants to find some entertainment with us? He must have some ulterior motive. It's just that we haven't figured it out yet. Green frowned. Hastings's move is also superfluous. He could have told Manninger about our situation here. After all, this is the territory of the Scarlet Snow Army. As long as Manninger sends an army to deal with us, it'll be fine. But why did Hastings intervene? The two of them discussed for a while, but they still had no clue. They only felt that Hastings's actions were unreasonable. In the end, Shea could only rest in silence. Back in the room, Shea threw the fire fork heavily on the table. However, he heard Dora's voice in his mind. Idiot. What? Shea raised his eyebrows. I said that you're an idiot. Your brain is too simple. Dora's voice was full of mockery. You and that guy named Green, both of you are only thinking about the problem from a tactical and strategic point of view. That Green is a general. It's fine if he only considers strategic factors. What about you? Could it be that the war has made your brain stupid? Could it be that Hastings did this for some other reason? Some other reason? Shea was about to refute when his heart suddenly moved. He slowly sat down and his face gradually calmed down. You mean, maybe. This matter has nothing to do with the war this time. Shea was speechless. I'll continue to update later. The next chapter will be up in a while. I'll definitely complete the mission of 12,000 tonight. I'm still suffering from jet lag. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 305. GOR Chapter 291. Mr. Peach, east of Denzel City, about 100 li away, there is a stream here. It originates from a mountain range in the northern part of the Byzantine Empire. The stream that flows from north to south is not wide and the amount of water is not large. Every year, it is only abundant during the rainy season. The rest of the time, it is in a semi-dry state. It is this stream that is an important place in the northern part of the Byzantine Empire. Almost all of the empire's maps indicate this very small stream. This is because this stream forms the border between two grain-producing counties in the northern part of the empire. To the east of the stream is Naz County and to the west is Moore County. It is currently evening. About 100 meters away from the eastern bank of the stream, there is a figure standing quietly on top of a slope. A pair of eagle-like sharp eyes are looking across the stream towards the far west. This figure is not tall, but as he stands there, the sunset glow that fills the sky seems to envelop him. Under the glow of the sunset glow, he looks incomparably majestic and imposing. Not even a step away from him, there is a black triangular war spear that is longer than his body inserted into the ground. The smooth shaft of the spear faintly exudes a soft and dark luster. On the shaft of the spear there are faint metal patterns. About 10 steps behind this figure, there were several men who were as strong as wild beasts. However, they were all looking at the back of the man on the hillside with reverence in their eyes. After looking for a full quarter of an hour, Hastings finally sighed softly. When he turned around, the long black cloak behind him gently fluttered. At this moment, it is as if a dark shadow has appeared on his body, blocking out the sunset glow. Standing 10 steps away, they could clearly feel the dense baleful aura coming from martial god Odin's body. Did we fail? Hastings spoke in a very casual tone. However, the tens of Odin warriors lowered their heads, not daring to make eye contact with him. The leader of them whispered, "Yes, respected and fearless war god, we have tarnished your name. Those Byzantium people are very brave. They are 100 times stronger compared to the sheep we encountered before. We tried probing them several times, but they courageously came forward. Additionally, they do not lack the courage to fight and sacrifice. Hastings's face remained unchanged and he asked, "How many men did we lose?" A total of 160 brave warriors died under the swords of the Byzantium people. The man with a strong physique raised his head and said, "Respected sir, do you want to transfer one banner from the army over here? As long as we have one banner, we can destroy Denzel City. We can make those damned Byzantium people groan miserably under our blades." Hastings snorted and looked at his subordinate. "No need." He raised one of his hands and looked at his palm. "This matter must be kept secret. We cannot let too many people know about it." "Yes." The Odin warrior immediately lowered his head. "We pledge our lives to follow the great Hastings. We will never let this matter be leaked out." Pausing for a moment, his cold face revealed a gentle smile. "I believe in your loyalty. All right, where is Mr. Peach?" The few Odin warriors looked at each other. The leader whispered, "Mr. Peach, he said that he went for a walk by the stream." Scattered. Hastings did not comment, but the corners of his lips curled up slightly. About 100 meters away from the hillside, within a forest by the stream, a figure was sitting by the stream. A pair of shoes were placed beside him and his feet were gently swaying in the water. From the back view of this person, one could see that his shoulders were thin and his grayish-white hair was sparse. Even his hair was casually tied up in a crooked manner. It appeared as though he was very comfortable sitting by the river. This person hummed an unknown tune as his feet swayed back and forth in the water. After a while, he let out a long sigh. Soaking my feet in the cool river water, watching the sunset and enjoying the evening breeze. If only I had some wine at this time, it would be even more wonderful." After saying that, he tilted his shoulders and turned his head to the side. He smiled and said, "Don't you think so, Hastings?" Behind him, Hastings was already standing by the riverside. He looked down at the man's back and said nothing. He casually tossed a leather pouch over. The man caught the pouch and opened it. After sniffing it, he became overjoyed. "Good stuff. I heard that you are very strict with your army and forbid alcohol during the march. I didn't expect that as the commander, you would bring." After laughing a few times, he gulped down a few mouthfuls. Then, he wiped the wine off the corner of his mouth and exhaled. "Not bad, not bad. It is a pity that Odin's wine-making ability is too poor. He blindly pursues strength. It is refreshing and spicy, but not mellow enough." Hastings's face was expressionless as he said coldly, "It is good enough that you can drink it." Hearing that, the man was slightly startled. Then, he smiled. "I have a way." He casually poured out a small half of the wine from the leather pouch, and then soaked the leather pouch in the stream. After pouring a lot of water into the pouch, he shook it a few times in his hand and said with a smile, "This way, the taste is much lighter." After drinking 2 more mouthfuls, he handed the leather pouch to Hastings. "Do you want to try it too?" Hastings didn't reach out to take it. He only looked at the man's feet that were soaked in the stream and said coldly, "I have no interest in drinking foot-washing water. You can keep it for yourself." Hearing that, the man didn't get angry. He kept the leather pouch and tucked it into his belt. Then, he jumped up and put on his shoes without wiping his wet feet. After this man stood up, he was slightly taller than Hastings. However, his appearance was old. His face was full of deep wrinkles. At the corner of his mouth and eyes, there were fine lines that looked like they were carved out with a knife. If one were to look at his appearance, he was just an ordinary old man. However, his pair of eyes, which should have been turbid, looked as clear as water. An old man of his age shouldn't have such a pair of clear eyes. It was as if looking at this pair of eyes, one would overlook his originally rough and ordinary appearance. This pair of eyes on his face was like a piece of rotten tree root inlaid with two bright gems. Failed. He looked at Hastings and smiled. Then, he walked into the forest. Hastings silently followed behind the man. The two of them walked into the forest and casually found a rock to sit down on. The man plucked a large leaf and used it as a fan to gently fan himself. Then, he looked at Hastings and said, "It seems you failed. Otherwise, you wouldn't have such an expression." Hastings gave a long sigh. "Mr. Peach, we have indeed encountered some trouble." "You are the one who encountered trouble, not us." The man called Mr. Peach shook his head and used the leaf to point at Hastings. "In any case, it doesn't matter to me whether or not I can find that place. However, for you, if you can't find that place, humph, Hastings remained silent. He lowered his head and pondered for a while. Then, he suddenly raised his head. "Without wasting any time," he said, "I originally thought that Moore County was Manninger's territory. However, after sending people there, I discovered that there was a resistance force in Denzel City. I don't know what happened to Manninger to have left behind such an enemy force. Normally, it wouldn't be a big deal. It's just a city of soldiers. We can just wipe them out. However, as you know, we can't let Manninger know about this. We can't let any of the nobles of Odin know about this. Even for my Black Flag army, I can only bring out a few hundred of my trusted subordinate." "Yes." Mr. Peach squinted his eyes and nodded lazily, as if he didn't care about it. Hastings continued. "Originally, I thought that this resistance force would be as weak as the other Byzantium garrisons. After sending out a few hundred cavalry to harass them, they should have been frightened and obediently retreated. Perhaps they would have abandoned the city and run away. Perhaps they would have obediently holed up in the city. However, this Byzantine army had some backbone and actually fought a few rounds with my men. Moreover, their fighting strength wasn't weak. Humph! I didn't expect this." At this point, Hastings finally sighed. "This matter is a secret. I can't bring out an army to exterminate this enemy force with great fanfare. I also can't let Manninger know. I only have a few hundred men. I can't scare these guys away." His brows were tightly knitted together. "If Manninger knows that I brought troops across the border, it will be troublesome. Moreover, we can't let him know about our actions. It's you, not us." Mr. Peach still had an indifferent expression. Hastings's eyes flashed with a trace of sharpness. He said coldly, "Mr. Peach, isn't it too late to say such words now?" Mr. Peach laughed. "The great martial god Odin Hastings, if you personally took action, you could flatten the entire city. What's there to worry about?" "Humph." Hastings's face was gloomy. "If I could take action, would I need to wait until now? As for you, Mr. Peach, I still want to ask you to take action." "Me?" Mr. Peach's eyes narrowed even more. He slowly shook his head. "You can forget about it. The entire continent understands that the strong do not compete with the common people. That was an agreement made decades ago. If I break it, I'm afraid that when the time comes, Emperor Hannigan will personally come out of the imperial city to kill me." Hastings was silent. He was silent for a long time. Finally, he shook his head. "I can't take action." A trace of bitterness appeared on his resolute face. "You know, the Divine Emperor has always been suspicious of me. All these years, I, as an outsider, have been calling the wind and calling the rain in Odin. Although the Divine Emperor has put me in an important position, he has never stopped suspecting me. I have been hiding myself all these years because I don't want him to see through my depth. If he knew, I'm afraid that the first person the Divine Emperor would kill would be me." "Sigh, do you really think that the Divine Emperor doesn't know your depth?" Mr. Peach suddenly sneered. "But you not taking action is also a wise choice. Once you really take action, then—" Hannigan will have a reason to take action against you. All these years, he has put you in an important position while guarding against you. In my opinion, he has long wanted to kill you. It's just that your reputation as martial god Odin is too great. He doesn't want to cause internal strife, so he has been watching you until now. Hastings's face was calm, but there was a trace of complexity in his eyes. After sitting there for a long time, he said in a low voice, "Are you willing to think of a way? If you continue to stay out of this, then this opportunity will be lost. We won't be able to find such a good opportunity again. Once Manninger returns with his army and exterminates the resistance army in Denzel City, the Divine Emperor will be on guard. If I want to get my hands on Moore County, it will be difficult. Actually, this isn't the real worry in your heart." Mr. Peach put down the leaf in his hand. "You are already eager to try and have the thought of taking the risk. But you are worried that if the place isn't in the north of Moore County, you will expose your strength and give the Divine Emperor an excuse. You won't get what you want." Hastings raised his head and stared at Mr. Peach. He said coldly, "I need to ask you about this? The exact location of that place was told to me by you. So, you better not be mistaken. Otherwise, if things don't work out, the first thing I will do is kill you." At the end of his words, a trace of black flame flashed in his eyes. "Since you have already made your decision, why are you still asking me?" Mr. Peach seemed fearless under Hastings's sharp gaze. He said indifferently, "I have already told you everything I know. I also guarantee that there is nothing false in what I said. But since you have already made your decision, then, you must understand that man proposes, but God disposes. Originally, this matter only had a 50% chance of success. You also said that this is your last chance. If you miss this chance, Hannigan has already decided to make a move on you. If you grab this chance, then you will have the capital to deal with him. If you miss this chance, then you will be a lamb under his claws. Don't look at how you are called War God Odin. You and I both know that if Hannigan really makes his move, you will have no chance at all. In this world, no one can resist his edge. Maybe 30 years ago that guy from Babylon could still do it. But today, 30 years later, Hannigan is the true number one in the world." When he said the words "number one in the world," Hastings's eyes shone brightly. After the sharpness flashed, he stood up and looked at the west coast. He sighed softly. Behind him, Mr. Peach's gaze was complicated. He said in a low voice, "The strong do not compete with the common people. Since you have already made your decision, then, if it works, then in the future, even Hannigan can't do anything to me. Although there are many strong people in the world, I don't need to pay attention to them anymore." After a pause, Hastings smiled. "Okay, I will bet." It was just a few words, but it seemed to contain endless determination. In a moment there are still 4,000 words. It will be posted soon. Wait a moment. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 306. GOR Chapter 292 Secret Struggle. Bobov Dax and the two beauties walked north for half a day. After leaving Goldhorn City, they didn't dare to take the main road and only took small detours. After walking for half a day, they arrived at a town. This town was located between Goldhorn City and Silverhorn City. It was called Jiao Town. Naturally, the three of them didn't know that when Shea went north to take up his post, it was here that he stopped a bandit from kidnapping a bride and became acquainted with the bandit leader, Miss Nene. At this moment, Jiao Town was sparsely populated. After the trade route was cut off, there were even fewer merchants coming in and out of the town. Most of the taverns and shops that were still open were closed. Although Nene's group of horse bandits had left this territory forever, without Nene's group of horse bandits, the government had sent a tax collector. As a result, the townspeople began to miss Nene's group of horse bandits even more. Although Miss Nene was a little rude and unreasonable, she did not do anything outrageous. Even when the horse gang went down the mountain to buy things, she did not rob them. Instead, she spent all of her money to buy things. She did not force people to buy or sell. Moreover, when she was here, the government didn't dare to tax here. Later, this place returned to the government's control. The governor of Acilia wasn't a good person to begin with, so he collected a few taxes under his name, making the townspeople miserable. Instead, after the civil war broke out and the Besta military district annexed the prefecture of Acilia, they reduced the taxes. That way, most of the townsfolk were leaning towards the rebel forces of the Besta military district. When the three of them entered the town, coincidentally, they entered the inn that Shea used to stay in. The owner of this inn almost had his son stolen by Miss Nene. After Shea stopped the wedding, Miss Nene led her people and left. As time passed, the townspeople began to criticize the owner of this inn. Especially after the tax collector came, the townspeople began to miss the days when the bandit group didn't pay taxes. Some people even said behind his back, the owner went crazy. Miss Nene is ugly, but she's a good person. If a son marries her, our town will be peaceful in the future. Now that Miss Nene left with her people, those annoying tax collectors came. As time passed, the townspeople began to hate this inn and stopped interacting with it, causing business to deteriorate. When the three of them arrived at the inn, the owner was sitting on the steps with his head in his hands, lost in thought. It wasn't until the dust kicked up by the horses hit his face that the owner snapped out of his daze. He looked at the three guests in front of him with a pleasant surprise and hurriedly put on a professional smile and respectfully welcomed them in. Business was not good, and the shop assistants had been fired long ago. Inside and outside, only the boss was busy. As for his son, a few days ago, he had been recruited into the army. After entering the store and seeing the deserted interior, Dax smiled and casually took out a silver coin and threw it on the table. The owner's eyes lit up as he grabbed the coin with both hands and bit it hard before putting it into his pocket. Then he quickly ran to the back of the store. Not long after, wine and meat were brought to the table. Dax seemed to have a good appetite. After the wine and meat were served, he chewed and swallowed with relish. The two girls, on the other hand, were staring at the entrance. Naturally, Weah had also arrived. Along the way, she had been following behind the three of them, not too much and not too little. She maintained a distance of about 60 meters. When the three of them entered the town, there were not many people in this small town, and there were no rebel soldiers stationed there. Weah slowly walked over and sat down on the street, still maintaining a distance of about 10 meters. Her expression was indifferent as she looked at the three people in the inn. How long is she going to follow us? Adeline was a little anxious. Why hasn't she come to save us yet? Daphne's expression was more complicated. She was thinking more than Adeline, especially what Dax had said on the way here. Is this woman really here to save us? Could it be that she also has other intentions? Although these words coming from Dax's mouth did not seem very believable, but Daphne really believed it. Thinking about it carefully, it seemed that it really was a little uneasy. She is still waiting. Dax suddenly opened his mouth. He looked at the two girls and sneered. Zitong rarely fails. She won't act rashly until she has the best chance and the best chance to take action. Humph, right now we are just competing in patience. On the street outside, Weah sat there with a calm expression on her face. She pulled out a bag from her bosom and opened it to reveal a piece of dried food. She gently tore off a piece and began eating it in small bites. Dax saw this and gave a light smile. He suddenly muttered to himself, "What kind of person am I, Dax? How could I take advantage of her like this? If word gets out that I am full and Zitong is hungry, even if I win, it will not be a glorious victory." After saying that, he picked up a piece of meat patty on the table and pulled out a short sword from his bosom. He stabbed it into the meat patty and raised his hand. With a whoosh, the short sword flew over. Vaya did not raise her head. She raised her left hand and easily caught the hilt of the sword. Looking at the food on the tip of the sword, Vaya snorted and took a bite. She then nodded to Dax in the shop as a sign of gratitude. Dax smiled. "Since there is meat, how can there be no wine?" After saying that, he threw the wine bottle on the table to Waya. Waya caught the bottle steadily and opened it. However, he frowned and casually threw the bottle on the ground. Then, he untied his backpack and took out a small leather pouch. He opened it and drank 2 mouthfuls. Then, he screwed the lid back on and threw it into the shop. Dax's eyes were serious as he raised his hand to catch the leather bag. He slowly opened the lid, sniffed it, and drank 2 mouthfuls. Then he wiped his mouth and smiled. "This is really good stuff. The wine that Purple Eye has is much better than the ones in this shop." After saying that, he threw the leather pouch back and looked at the food on the table. He smiled. "Reciprocity is reciprocity. You gave me good wine, so I can't be stingy." Behind the table, there were a few honeydew melons that had just been roasted. She grabbed one of them and took out a short knife. She gently cut it in half and threw the other half out. Waya quickly pulled out an arrow from the quiver on his back and pierced half of the melon into his hand. He brought the melon to his nose and sniffed it. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. He took a small bite, chewed it carefully, and swallowed it. He then took out a bottle from his bosom and said, "The taste is bland. Why don't we add some seasoning?" After saying that, she spilled a bit of the melon and threw it back. This time, Dax's expression became even more serious. He didn't dare to reach out and catch the melon. He suddenly stood up and shot out a cold light from his sleeve, nailing the melon to the ground. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a long and thin dagger. Dax looked at the spots on the melon and took a deep breath. He hesitated for a moment and finally sighed. "Forget it, I've eaten enough. Thank you for your kindness." After saying that, he threw the melon on the table next to him. The owner of the store had been watching from behind. He saw the customer and the strange woman outside the store throwing food at each other. He did not know what they were doing. Seeing the customer throw the other half of the melon on the table next to him, the owner had an idea. The store's business was not good to begin with. Recently, they had been losing money. The owner saw that the other half of the melon was only taken a bite and thrown to the side. He felt that it was a pity. He wanted to take it back and clean it so that it could be used for dinner. Seeing that the customer was not looking at him, he tiptoed over. Just as he was about to take the melon on the table, he suddenly smelled a strange fragrance. Then, with a thud, he fell to the ground. Dax turned his head and looked at the owner. He snorted and smiled faintly. "Is Lady Purple Eye's food something that you can casually eat?" After saying that, he flicked his finger and something shot into the owner's mouth. The owner's mind suddenly shook. He came back to his senses and hurriedly retreated. Both Daphne and Adeline were shocked to see this. It turned out that when the two of them were giving food to each other, it was an invisible battle. "Your Highnesses, don't be afraid." Dax smiled. "Just sit next to me and don't move around. Everything will be fine." After saying that, he hesitated for a moment and felt around in the small bag on his body. When he took out his hand, there were 2 fingernail-sized leaves in his palm. These 2 leaves were as thin as paper and were dark green in color. They were very beautiful. "One for each of you. Put it under your tongue. Don't eat it." Dax's tone was serious and there was a hint of irresistibility in it. Daphne hesitated for a moment before taking the leaf and putting it in her mouth. Adeline saw Daphne do so and also took the other leaf and put it in her mouth. Dax looked at the two girls' actions and smiled. Not bad. Now you're obedient. He then said leisurely. The first piece of meat I gave her added 4 ingredient. The bag of wine she gave me also added at least 8 ingredient. Sigh, it's a pity that I can't eat this melon. After saying that, he stood up and waved his hand at Vaya, who was outside the door. Dear Vaya, when it comes to using medicine, I admit defeat. Let's just say I lost for a while. After all, there will be opportunities later. I will naturally find an opportunity to turn things around. Vaya didn't say anything. He just smiled coldly and continued to eat. Dax quickly finished the food in front of him, and then drank a few mouthfuls of wine. Wiping his mouth, he said, All right, I'm full. Sigh, when you go out, don't mistreat your stomach. Adeline was getting more and more impatient. She gritted her teeth and said, You guys are acting all mysterious, dragging things out until now. If you want to fight, then let's decide who's the better one so we don't get impatient waiting on the side. Humph, I think you're afraid of that purple-haired big sister. Afraid? Dax raised an eyebrow, but then he looked at Adeline and smiled. He sighed. Yes, you're right. I am afraid of her. So what? Humph, meeting an opponent stronger than me, how can I not be afraid? He even straightened his neck and laughed loudly. Vaya, I said I'm afraid of you. Did you hear me? Vaya heard this and smiled. He slowly said, I heard you. I'm also very afraid of you. Dax laughed as if he was very proud. He glanced at Adeline and said, My dear long-legged beauty, did you hear that? She's also afraid of me. Ha 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 ha. Adeline gritted her teeth and humphed. She knew that she was not this scoundrel's opponent if they were to bicker. She might as well just shut up. Daphne slowly said from the side, When meeting someone stronger than you, who wouldn't be afraid, there's nothing dishonorable about being afraid. However, for someone as strong as you to bully 2 weak women like us, there's nothing to be proud of. Dax glanced at this beautiful crown prince consort and suddenly laughed. Ha! You're wrong. When a person has the ability, they naturally have to bully those who are weaker than them. Otherwise, why would so many people in this world rack their brains to train hard in martial arts and study magic with all their might? Is it because they want to close the door and practice for fun? Saying this shameless guy actually put his hands on his hips and laughed. If I don't bully you, do you think I'll find someone stronger than me to bully? Wouldn't that be courting death? This was truly the shameless words of a shameless person. Hearing this, Daphne was speechless. After a while, she finally said, I heard that the strong don't compete with the common world. It's rare for someone as strong as you to bully the weak like us. Daphne had a calm personality. When she said this, her tone was full of mockery. It was already rare for her to say such harsh words in her life. Dax didn't get angry. He laughed dryly and looked at the crown princess. So you've also heard of this saying, the strong don't compete with the common world. That's right, but I'm not some strong person. If you say I'm an expert, I'll admit it. But when it comes to strong person, I'm far from qualified. Saying this, Dax's smile became even wider. Speaking of which, I really don't have any interest in becoming a strong person. Otherwise, if I really become a strong person, I won't be able to act as I please. At that time, even if you've cultivated an invincible skill, what's the use? Daphne looked puzzled. What are you talking about? I don't understand, Dax snorted and glanced at Daphne. It seems that although you've heard of this saying, you don't know its true meaning. He looked out the window and muttered in a low voice, The strong don't compete with the common world. Humph, what a bullsh *T rule. **, I've finally finished all the homework I owe. I'm debt-free, so good, so good. According to the request of the readers, tomorrow's 8,000 words will be updated earlier. It'll be fine before 6, right? In the future, I'll do my best to update earlier every day. Yes, that's how it is. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com to read more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 307. Today's first update has been delivered. GOR Chapter 293. Adeline's determination. The more Adeline looked at Dax, the more she disliked him. She felt that the hateful nature of this fellow had far surpassed that country bumpkin Shea. However, although that country bumpkin of mine is rude and unreasonable, there is something cute about him. He is the epitome of disgusting. This bastard in front of me is the real villain. Thankfully, her experience with Shea had strengthened her mental fortitude. Otherwise, this fellow would have angered her to the point of vomiting blood and dying. Seeing the desolate look on Dax's face, Adeline gave a disdainful harumph. How do you know? Dax quickly turned his head to face Adeline. He snickered and made a face at her. Of course. In this continent, is there anything that I do not know? Shameless arrogance. Adeline clenched her teeth. You don't believe me? Dax revealed a very peculiar smile. Fine. For example, what color of underwear are you wearing today? Lao Tzu will know it is red. Go to hell. Adeline was enraged and she jumped up. Raising her hand, she flipped the table over and sent a kick toward Dax's face. Dax's body moved back half a meter like a ghost. Adeline's kick missed and she nearly fell onto Dax's body. Thankfully, Daphne was quick enough to grab her arm. Then, she heard Daphne whisper, "Enough, don't do anything. You will suffer." "I don't care." Adeline's face turned red from anger. "I know I cannot beat him. However, this bastard has humiliated me too much. Today, I will fight him to the death." After saying that, she reached out with her hand to grab the stool on the floor and hurled it toward Dax's head. Dax caught the stool and gave it a gentle tug. Adeline felt her hand becoming empty as the stool flew behind Dax. There was still that infuriating smile on Dax's face. "What is it? It is red to begin with. Am I wrong?" "You!" Adeline was truly enraged. "Shameless bastard! How dare you peep? Today, either you die or I die." She gritted her teeth and charged forward with her fists raised. Dax deliberately put on a helpless expression and slapped Adeline's fist away. He smiled and said, "Don't accuse me, I didn't peek at you. Bastard. You didn't peep. So how did you know that I—" Adeline stopped mid-sentence. How could she say such a shameful thing? "I wasn't peeping in the first place. If Lao Tzu wanted to see it, he would have swaggered over. Why would he do something like that?" Dax dodged Adeline's kick. He just sat there, but no matter how much Adeline punched and kicked, she couldn't land a single hit on his body. After all, Adeline did not have much strength. After a few punches and kicks, she began to pant. Dax sighed and raised his hands with a smile. Fine, I'll tell the truth. I guessed it, okay? I saved you two from the governor's mansion and bought you some clothes on the way. Do you think I didn't know? I bought a total of 3. Today, I accidentally saw that you had 2 more in your bag. The red one wasn't in your bag. Naturally, you're wearing it. Hey, I'm telling the truth. You still don't believe me? Seeing that Adeline was about to kick again, Dax chuckled. Keep kicking. If you keep kicking, Lao Tzu will touch your leg. Hearing this, Adeline really did put down her leg and didn't dare to kick again. If this disgusting man touched her body, she was afraid that she would really kill herself out of shame. Adeline had already sworn that in this life, other than that despicable country bumpkin, no other man could even think of touching her body with a finger. After panting for a while, Adeline stared at Dax. Daphne stood beside Adeline with a cold expression on her face. She looked at Dax coldly. Sir, you've escorted us all the way here. We've accepted this kindness. But you've repeatedly disrespected my sister. What is the meaning of this? You're a man, aren't you ashamed? What do I mean? Dax didn't get angry and only smiled. I like her. Can't I? Dax said these words so casually without any hesitation. This caused Adeline and Daphne to be stunned. What's so strange about men liking beautiful women? Dax said confidently. I like beautiful women with long legs. Can't I? You. Daphne didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This guy said these words on the spot. It didn't sound like a confession, nor did it sound like he was revealing his true feelings. It sounded more like he was buying groceries at the market. This guy had been flirting all the way here, but thinking about it carefully, Daphne couldn't help but be moved. Could it be true? This guy seemed to like flirting with Adeline the most, but he didn't really do anything to her. He only teased her with his mouth. Adeline was also stunned. Her face turned even redder. She was born with a beautiful face and had many men around her since she was young. She was also of the royal bloodline. So many young noblemen of the empire had more or less expressed their love for her. However, there was no man like this bastard in front of her, who could say these words so calmly and confidently. She was stunned at first, and a trace of shyness naturally appeared in her heart. But this trace of shyness quickly faded and turned into anger. Her expression changed, and she glared at Dax. Laughing loudly, she pointed at Dax and said loudly, "You? Let me tell you, I already have a man. My man is the most honorable, most valiant, and most manly hero in the world. A guy like you isn't even fit to carry his shoes. I will only love him for the rest of my life. I won't even look at other men. You better give up on these thoughts as soon as possible." Dax giggled. Her Highness Adeline already has a lover. I really don't seem to know about this. May I know which hero you're talking about? Adeline puffed up her chest, bit her lips, and said loudly, "My man's name is Shea Thunder." Listen carefully. If he saw you bullying me like this, he would have used his fork to poke 17 or 18 holes in you. As she said that, she pulled out a small knife from her bosom and pulled at her hair. The knife fell and a strand of hair was cut off. Adeline's expression was solemn, and there was a hint of an inviolable aura in her eyes. She stared at Dax, and pressed the knife against her own throat. She said slowly, word by word, "If you insult me again, even if I'm not your opponent and can't kill you, I can still end my own life. There's no need to do that. I won't let you insult me." The last sentence was said with absolute determination. Every word was resolute and decisive, causing Dax to be stunned. Looking at the small knife in Adeline's hand and the strand of hair on the table, the smile on Dax's face slowly disappeared. He finally stood up and bowed to Adeline. His tone was much more serious, with a hint of respect. "All right, I have offended you before. I formally apologize to you." Daphne was also stunned. She didn't think that a girl like Adeline, who was originally soft and gentle, would suddenly become so unyielding. Seeing the small knife in her hand and her resolute expression, if this man really dared to tease her again, Adeline might really stab the knife into her own neck. After being stunned, Daphne hurriedly grabbed Adeline's arm and took the small knife from her hand. Then, she hugged Adeline. Suddenly, her heart ached and tears flowed out. Seeing the tears on Daphne's face, Adeline was stunned. She hugged Daphne back and whispered, "Why are you crying? You must not do this kind of thing again." Daphne's voice was choked with sobs. "If anything happens to you, after a pause, the beautiful crown princess said in a low voice, "You really love that man. I am truly happy for you." The three people in the shop were in a heated argument. At the intersection outside, Via was sitting on the roadside. Although she was eating and drinking calmly, when she heard Adeline say, "My man's name is Shea Thunder," a hint of surprise flashed across her eyes. Just then, someone suddenly knocked on the door of the shop. Half of the person's body poked inside. Where is the boss? Is there anyone here?" A tall man stood outside the door. There was a horse beside him, and he held the reins in his hand. He was quite handsome and appeared to be in his 30s or 40s. However, there was a look of fatigue on his face. This person was dressed in casual clothes. Ordinary clothes made of coarse linen. However, he was dressed as a warrior. A sword was hanging under the saddle. When this person walked in, Dax glanced at him. A hint of surprise flashed across his eyes. When his gaze fell on the other party's hand, he could not help but frown. This man was wearing a pair of black leather gloves. However, his thumb was crooked to the side. It was obvious that his hand was disabled. His thumb was no longer there. Hearing this person's shout, the boss inside quickly ran out. He was still in a state of shock. However, when he saw the person outside the shop, he was stunned. This customer looks very familiar. Then, he slapped his head with a face full of surprise. I remember now. You are the follower of the person who helped me chase away the bandit leader last time. The person who came in smiled. I didn't expect you to remember me. Please take my horse to the back and feed it. Also, get some food and drinks. After saying that, this person walked into the shop. When he passed by Dax and the other two, he only gave them a few more glances. He did not do anything else. Then, he found a table inside and sat down. The boss's face was full of joy and gratitude. Not long after, he ran out with some food and drink. He even said some words of thanks. The person who came in was none other than Shea's subordinate, Philip. Philip had received orders from Shea to go to Osgilla. He was going to the Rhodian cavalry regiment to meet the crown prince. After he left Moore County, he went all the way north. At the moment there was chaos everywhere. It was very difficult to travel on the road, especially for a lone man like him, who could not hide his warrior's temperament. He was interrogated a lot. Moreover, during the rainy season, many roads were blocked, so his speed was even slower. Philip had done his best, but it was only today that he finally reached Edgetown. The last time he followed Shea to the north, Philip had passed by this town. At that time, he even helped the boss of this shop to stop Miss Nene from kidnapping the bride. The boss naturally remembered Philip and was full of gratitude. He even piled up a lot of good food and drinks. Philip just sat there and ate with his head lowered. He did not speak much and did not look around. He was very low-key. However, even though his expression was calm, his mind was spinning rapidly. It was not because of anything else. It was because when he walked to the door of the shop, he happened to hear a woman's voice from inside. My man's name is Shea Thunder. When these words fell into Philip's ears, his heart suddenly jumped. Shea Thunder? Lord Shea? If that was the case, the person speaking inside was Lord Shea's woman? Although it was not uncommon for people with the same name to have the same surname, the name Shea Thunder was rare. Moreover, right after this sentence, Adeline said something like, I'll use a flaming fork to stab 17 or 18 holes in you. In this world, there might be other people with the name Shea Thunder. However, the name Shea Thunder, who liked to use a flaming fork as a weapon to stab people. Philip immediately confirmed that other than the boss he was loyal to now, there was no one else. Philip was the leader of a warrior group in his early years. Naturally, he had plenty of experience in the martial world. He was also meticulous and cunning. Although he heard the voice outside, he did not immediately act rashly. This was because he saw that the woman who spoke in the shop had a knife to his throat. This scene shocked Philip to the core. Could it be that someone was humiliating Lord Shea's woman? How could he sit back and do nothing when he encountered such a thing? Thinking up to this point, Philip had already made preparations in secret. There will be an update later. Soon, I'm writing and almost finished. I'll post it up later this weekend. Please vote also. I wish everyone a happy weekend. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.